The moment Daniel Hayes saw the 8-year-old girl trapped in the burning SUV, her terrified screams cutting through the roar of the wildfire, he knew he had exactly 30 seconds before the flames would consume everything. What this single father didn't know was that the child he was about to save belonged to one of America's most powerful CEOs, and that his split-second decision to run straight into hell would change not just 2 lives, but an entire community forever. Stay with me as I share this incredible true story of courage, and comment below which city you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story of hope has traveled. The morning of September 15th started like any other Saturday for Daniel Hayes. He stood at the kitchen counter of his modest 2-bedroom house in Cedar Ridge, California, scrambling eggs while his 11-year-old daughter Emma practiced her violin in the living room. The notes of Bach's Minuet in G drifted through the small home, occasionally punctuated by Emma's frustrated sighs when she hit a wrong note. "Dad, this part is impossible," Emma called out, her voice carrying that particular blend of determination and exasperation that only preteens could master. Daniel smiled, wiping his hands on the dish towel tucked into his belt. "Nothing's impossible, Em. Remember what we always say?" "One note at a time," Emma replied, though he could hear the eye roll in her voice. "But this is like a million notes all at once." "Then take it slower. Rome wasn't built in a day." Daniel plated the eggs and walked into the living room, where Emma sat cross-legged on their worn brown couch, her rental violin balanced on her knee. Her dark hair, the same shade as her late mother's, fell in a curtain across her face as she studied the sheet music with intense concentration. 3 years had passed since Sarah's death, but moments like these still caught Daniel off guard. How much Emma looked like her mother when she concentrated, the way she bit her lower lip when focusing, just as Sarah had done when reviewing her nursing charts late at night. "Breakfast is ready," Daniel announced, setting the plate on their small dining table. "And after you eat, we're heading up to Pine Lake for that hiking trip I promised you." Emma's face lit up. "Really? You got the day off?" "Traded shifts with Marcus. He owes me one from when his kid had that soccer tournament." Daniel worked as a mechanic at Henderson's auto shop in town, a job that kept food on the table but rarely allowed for extras. The violin rental was their one luxury, something Daniel insisted on maintaining despite the tight budget. Sarah had loved music, had dreams of Emma learning an instrument, and Daniel was determined to honor that wish. As they ate breakfast, Emma chattered excitedly about the hiking trip. "Can we go to the waterfall, the one you and Mom used to visit?" "Crystal Falls? That's a pretty long hike, Em. Sure you're up for it?" "I'm 11, not 5, Emma said with mock indignation. "Besides, I want to see the place where you proposed to Mom." Daniel's throat tightened. He'd told Emma the story countless times, how he'd carried the ring in his pocket for 3 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. How Sarah had actually said yes before he'd even finished asking the question, both of them laughing and crying by the waterfall's edge. "All right, Crystal Falls it is, but we need to get moving. Weather report says winds are picking up this afternoon." They packed their hiking bags with water bottles, sandwiches, trail mix, and Emma's emergency inhaler. She had mild asthma, usually well controlled, but Daniel never took chances. He also threw in the small first aid kit he always carried, a habit from his 4 years as an Army medic before Emma was born. As they loaded everything into Daniel's aging Ford pickup, their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, waved from her garden. "Beautiful day for a hike," she called out. "Perfect day," Daniel agreed, though he noticed the unusual warmth in the air for September. The leaves on the oak trees lining their street seemed brittle, crackling in the slight breeze. California had experienced another dry summer, the 4th in a row, leaving the mountains around Cedar Ridge primed for disaster. But wildfire season was always a concern in these parts. Residents had learned to live with the annual threat the way Midwesterners lived with tornado season. The drive up Highway 38 toward Pine Lake took them through increasingly dense forest. Ponderosa pines and Douglas firs lined the winding road, their branches creating a canopy overhead. Emma had her window down, her hand surfing through the air current, singing along to the classic rock station Daniel favored. "Dad, look!" Emma suddenly pointed ahead. "Is that smoke?" Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. In the distance, a gray plume rose above the tree line. His mind immediately began calculating wind direction, distance, potential routes. The smoke appeared to be several miles north of their location, probably near Deer Creek Canyon. Not an immediate threat to their planned hiking area, but something to monitor. Probably a controlled burn, he told Emma, though his gut suggested otherwise. Controlled burns didn't usually produce smoke that dark, that aggressive in its climb toward the sky. They continued driving, Daniel's eyes repeatedly checking the rearview mirror, watching the smoke plume. It seemed to be growing, spreading wider across the horizon. His phone, mounted on the dashboard, buzzed with an emergency alert. Wildfire reported in Deer Creek Canyon. Evacuation orders in effect for zones 4-7. Dad? Emma's voice had lost its earlier excitement. We're in zone 12, sweetheart. We're fine. But even as he said it, Daniel was already mentally mapping alternate routes home. His military training had taught him to always have an exit strategy, and right now, Highway 38 was their only way back to Cedar Ridge, unless they wanted to take the much longer eastern route through Riverside County. They had just passed the Pine Lake turnoff when everything changed. The wind shifted suddenly, violently, sending pine needles and debris swirling across the road. The smoke plume, which had been drifting north, suddenly bent toward them like a living thing. Daniel could smell it now, that acrid, unmistakable scent of burning forest. We're heading back, Daniel announced, already looking for a place to turn around. That's when they hit the traffic. Cars, trucks, and RVs had suddenly materialized, all heading down the mountain. Daniel could see people's faces through their windows. Controlled panic, the look of people trying to maintain calm while every instinct screamed at them to flee. His phone rang through the truck's Bluetooth system. It was Marcus from the auto shop. Danny, you up on the mountain? Fire jumped the containment line. They're evacuating everything west of Pine Lake. We're on 38 about mile marker 23. Traffic's backing up. Get out of there, man. This thing's moving fast, real fast. The line crackled and went dead. Cell towers were probably overloaded with emergency calls. Daniel looked at Emma, whose face had gone pale. It's going to be fine, Em. We've got plenty of time. But even as he spoke, he could see the sky changing color, shifting from blue to an ominous orange-gray. Ash began to fall like snow, speckling the windshield. The traffic had slowed to a crawl, a serpentine line of vehicles all trying to navigate the narrow mountain road. That's when Daniel heard it, a sound that would haunt him for years to come. It started as a distant roar like a freight train in a tunnel, but it grew louder, more violent. The fire wasn't just coming, it was racing toward them with a speed that defied logic. Dad! Emma's voice cracked with fear. Daniel's training kicked in. He pulled onto the narrow shoulder, scanning their surroundings. The road curved ahead, limiting visibility. Cars were stopped completely now, some people getting out of their vehicles to see what was happening. To their right, the mountain dropped off steeply into a ravine. To their left, the forest pressed close to the road. Through the maze of stopped vehicles, Daniel spotted a black Cadillac SUV about 6 cars ahead. Its hazard lights were flashing, and he could see someone inside struggling with something. Then he heard it, a child's scream, high-pitched and terrified, cutting through the chaos. Stay in the truck, Daniel commanded Emma, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he'd used as a sergeant. Windows up, air conditioning on recirculate. If I'm not back in 5 minutes, you call 911 and tell them exactly where you are. Mile marker 23 on Highway 38. Dad, no! Don't leave me! Daniel turned to his daughter, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. Emma, look at me. Someone needs help. That's what we do. We help people. I'll be right back. Promise me you'll stay in the truck. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. Please be careful. Daniel sprinted toward the SUV, weaving between abandoned vehicles. The smoke was thickening now, reducing visibility to maybe 30 feet. His eyes watered, his throat burning with each breath. The screaming grew louder as he approached the Cadillac. Through the heavily tinted rear window, he could make out a small figure in the back seat, thrashing against what appeared to be a seatbelt. The child, a girl he realized, was alone in the vehicle. No adults in sight. Daniel tried the door handle. Locked. He pounded on the window. Hold on! I'm going to get you out! The girl's face turned toward him, and the terror he saw there nearly stopped his heart. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with blonde hair and wide blue eyes streaming with tears. She was yanking frantically at her seatbelt, which appeared to be jammed. Where are your parents? Daniel shouted through the glass. The girl pointed ahead, sobbing too hard to speak clearly. Daniel followed her gesture and saw two figures near a silver Mercedes about 4 cars ahead, a man and woman arguing with what appeared to be a driver, seemingly oblivious to the child trapped in the SUV behind them. There was no time to get them. The roar was getting louder, and Daniel could see the actual flames now, cresting the ridge above them like an orange tsunami. Trees were exploding, literally exploding, as the superheated air caused the moisture in their trunks to expand instantly into steam. Daniel ran back to his truck, ignoring Emma's frightened questions, and grabbed the tire iron from behind the seat. Back at the SUV, he shouted for the girl to move away from the window. She scrambled to the opposite side of the back seat, covering her head with her arms. The safety glass, spider-webbed on the first strike, crumbled inward on the second. Daniel reached through, ignoring the cuts on his arms from the glass fragments, and manually unlocked the door. The heat was incredible now, like standing in front of an open forge. "Come here, sweetheart," he said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the circumstances. The girl shook her head, still pulling at the seatbelt. "It won't come off, it's stuck." Daniel climbed into the vehicle. The seatbelt had indeed jammed. The mechanism locked tight. He pulled out his pocket knife, another artifact from his military days, and began sawing through the tough nylon material. The girl watched him with those terrified blue eyes. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to distract her from the approaching inferno. "Lily," she whispered. "Okay, Lily. I'm Daniel, and I'm going to get you out of here. Where did your parents go?" "My mom, she went to help someone. Told me to stay." Lily's voice broke into sobs again. The strap finally gave way. Daniel scooped Lily into his arms just as the first burning branch crashed onto the SUV's hood. The metal groaned and popped from the sudden heat. Through the smoke, he could see his truck. Impossibly far away now, it seemed, though it couldn't have been more than 50 feet. "Close your eyes and hold your breath," he told Lily, pulling his shirt up over her face. Daniel ran. Behind them, the Cadillac's gas tank ruptured with a sound like a gunshot. The heat on his back was unbearable, like being pressed against a giant iron. His jacket began to smoke, the synthetic material melting. Someone screamed his name. Emma, he realized, standing outside the truck despite his orders, reaching for him. He stumbled, his vision blurring from the smoke and heat. Strong hands suddenly grabbed him. Other evacuees who had seen what was happening, forming a human chain to pull him and Lily to safety. They tumbled behind a large pickup truck just as a wall of flames swept across where they'd been standing. The Cadillac was fully engulfed now, black smoke pouring from its windows. Someone threw a blanket over Daniel's back, smothering the flames that had caught on his jacket. "My daughter!" A woman's scream pierced through the chaos. "Lily!" Daniel looked up to see a woman in an expensive business suit running toward them, her face a mask of absolute terror. She looked to be in her late 30s, with professionally styled blonde hair now disheveled and ash-covered. Behind her, a man in a charcoal gray suit followed, his face pale with shock. "Mommy!" Lily cried out, struggling in Daniel's arms. The woman, Victoria Langston, though Daniel didn't know her name yet, fell to her knees beside them, pulling Lily into a fierce embrace. Her whole body shook with sobs as she held her daughter, running her hands over Lily's face and arms, checking for injuries. "I'm sorry, Mommy," Lily cried. "I couldn't get out. The belt was stuck and you were gone, and— Shh, baby, it's okay. You're okay." Victoria looked up at Daniel then, and he saw something shift in her expression, a recognition of what had almost happened, what would have happened if he hadn't intervened. "You saved her." Daniel, still catching his breath, his back screaming with pain from the burns, simply nodded. Emma had pressed herself against his side, clinging to his arm with both hands. "We need to move," someone shouted. "Fire's jumping the road." Indeed, the flames had crossed the highway behind them, cutting off any retreat in that direction. The only way now was forward, down the mountain, but the traffic was still gridlocked. "Everyone out of your vehicles!" A firefighter appeared through the smoke, his face mask reflecting the orange glow of the approaching fire. "Leave your cars! We're evacuating on foot to the safety zone at Pine Lake parking area." What followed was controlled chaos. Hundreds of people abandoned their vehicles, parents carrying children, strangers helping strangers. Daniel, despite his injuries, helped an elderly couple from their RV. Victoria Langston carried Lily, who had her face buried in her mother's shoulder. The man with Victoria, her driver, as it turned out, not her husband, tried to retrieve something from the Mercedes but was turned back by the firefighters. They moved as a group through the smoke and falling ash, firefighters directing them along the shoulder of the road. The sound of the fire behind them was apocalyptic. Trees crashing, tires exploding, the roar of superheated air creating its own weather system. Emma held Daniel's hand tightly, her breathing labored from the smoke and exertion. He monitored her carefully, ready to carry her if necessary, but she pushed on with determination that made his heart swell with pride even in this moment of terror. "You okay, Em?" he asked. She nodded, though he could see the fear in her eyes. "That was really brave, what you did." "That's what people do for each other," Daniel replied, though he noticed Victoria Langston glancing back at him when he said it. The Pine Lake parking area appeared through the smoke like an oasis. Emergency vehicles had created a perimeter, and medical tents were already set up. The moment they crossed into the safety zone, Daniel's adrenaline finally began to ebb, and the pain from his burns crashed over him like a wave. A paramedic immediately approached him, noting the charred jacket and the way he was holding his back. "Sir, we need to look at those burns." "Take care of the kids first," Daniel insisted, gesturing to Emma and the other children in their group. "Dad, you're hurt," Emma protested. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Let them check your breathing first." As the paramedics began triaging the evacuees, Victoria Langston approached Daniel again. Up close, even covered in ash and disheveled from their escape, she carried herself with an unmistakable air of authority. This was someone used to being in charge, used to having control, which made the raw vulnerability in her eyes all the more striking. "I don't even know your name," she said, Lily still clinging to her like a koala. "Daniel Hayes. This is my daughter, Emma." "Victoria Langston." She paused, seeming to struggle with what to say next. "What you did..." "I left her for just a minute. There was an accident ahead. Someone was hurt, and I thought, God, I left her in the car. If you hadn't..." Her voice broke completely then, and Lily reached up to pat her mother's face. "It's okay, Mommy. Mr. Daniel saved me." The paramedic returned, insistent now about treating Daniel's burns. As he was led to the medical tent, he heard Victoria on her phone, her voice shifting into what he would later learn was her CEO mode, calm, authoritative, decisive. "I need the emergency response team mobilized immediately. Yes, all of them. I don't care what it costs. We have hundreds of people here who need shelter, food, medical care. What do you mean the hotels are full? Then open our corporate retreat center. Yes, the whole thing." In the medical tent, as a paramedic carefully treated the second-degree burns across Daniel's back and arms, he watched through the open flap as Victoria worked her phone, orchestrating what appeared to be a massive relief effort. She had Lily on her hip, the girl refusing to be put down, while simultaneously coordinating with someone about emergency supplies, temporary housing, and medical resources. "Your husband?" the paramedic asked, following Daniel's gaze. "No," Daniel replied. "Just someone whose daughter I helped." The paramedic, a young woman named Rodriguez, according to her name tag, raised an eyebrow. "You helped Victoria Langston's daughter? The Victoria Langston?" "I don't know who that is," Daniel admitted. Rodriguez looked at him like he'd said he didn't know who the president was. "She's the CEO of Langston Technologies. They do all the tech infrastructure for like half of California. She's worth billions." Daniel absorbed this information with a mix of surprise and indifference. Rich or poor, she was just a mother who had almost lost her child. He knew that terror intimately. It was the same fear that gripped him every time Emma had an asthma attack, every time she was out of his sight for too long. Emma appeared at the tent entrance, an oxygen mask in her hand but not on her face. "Dad, you okay?" "Come here, Em." She curled up beside him on the cot, careful not to touch his bandaged back. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the controlled chaos outside. Fire crews were arriving constantly. Helicopters thundered overhead, dropping water on the advancing fire line, and evacuees continued to stream into the safety zone. "Were you scared?" Emma asked quietly. "Terrified," Daniel admitted. "But sometimes being brave means being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway." "Like Mom, when she was sick?" Daniel's throat tightened. Sarah had faced her cancer with a courage that still humbled him. Even in her final days, she'd been more concerned about how he and Emma would manage without her than her own pain. Exactly like Mom. They were interrupted by a commotion outside. A news crew had arrived and was trying to interview Victoria Langston. Daniel could hear her voice, controlled but firm. "I'm not interested in making a statement right now. These people need help, not sound bites. If you want to be useful, put down your cameras and help distribute water bottles." Despite his pain, Daniel smiled. He was starting to understand how Victoria Langston had become a CEO. As the afternoon wore on, the fire continued its destructive path, but the immediate danger to the Pine Lake area had passed. The parking lot had transformed into a makeshift refugee camp. The Red Cross arrived with emergency supplies. Food trucks, summoned by some invisible organizing force, Victoria's doing, Daniel would later learn, began distributing free meals. Daniel was sitting with Emma, sharing a bottle of water and trying to figure out their next steps. Their truck was somewhere in that line of abandoned vehicles, likely destroyed, and they had no way to get home, when Victoria appeared again. She had cleaned up somewhat, the ash washed from her face, though her expensive suit was ruined beyond salvation. Lily held her hand, looking shy but determined. "Mr. Hayes, Daniel," Victoria began, "I've arranged for buses to transport evacuees to emergency shelters in Riverside, but I wanted to speak with you first." "We'll be fine," Daniel said automatically. "We'll figure something out." Victoria studied him for a moment, and he saw something in her expression, a recognition, perhaps, of pride meeting pride. "I'm not offering charity, Mr. Hayes. I'm trying to thank the man who saved my daughter's life." "No thanks necessary. Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," Victoria said quietly. "Everyone else ran past that SUV. Only you stopped." Lily tugged on her mother's hand, whispering something. Victoria nodded and gently nudged her forward. The little girl approached Daniel slowly, clutching something in her hand. "This is for you," Lily said, holding out a small stuffed rabbit, singed around the edges. "His name is Mr. Hoppy. He keeps me safe, but I think you need him more right now." Daniel felt his eyes burn with something that had nothing to do with the smoke. Emma made a soft sound beside him, reaching out to accept the rabbit on her father's behalf since his movement was limited by the burns. "Thank you, Lily," Daniel said solemnly. "I'll take good care of Mr. Hoppy." Victoria cleared her throat, visibly affected by her daughter's gesture. "There's a suite available at the Riverside Grand Hotel. For you and Emma, for as long as you need it." "That's very generous, but please." Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "I need to do something. I need to. When I close my eyes, I see that SUV in flames, and I know she would have been—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Daniel understood. He'd seen enough trauma in Afghanistan to recognize survivors' guilt, the desperate need to somehow balance the scales of a near tragedy. But he also had his pride, and taking charity, even from a billionaire, didn't sit well with him. "Mom," Emma spoke up suddenly, "would have said yes." The words hung in the air. Daniel looked at his daughter, seeing Sarah's wisdom in her young eyes. Sarah, who had always told him his pride would be the death of him. Sarah, who had accepted help gracefully when she was sick, understanding that sometimes receiving was its own form of giving. "All right," he said finally, "but just until we can figure out our next steps." Victoria smiled then, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, making her look younger, less like a CEO, and more like just another parent who'd had the worst scare of her life. "Robert will drive you," she said, gesturing to the man in the suit who'd been hovering nearby. The driver, Daniel remembered. "He'll take you to the hotel and make sure you have everything you need." As they prepared to leave, Daniel noticed the news crew had set up despite Victoria's earlier dismissal. They were interviewing evacuees, capturing the drama of the day. When they spotted Victoria, they surged forward again, but this time their cameras also found Daniel. "Is it true this man saved your daughter from a burning vehicle?" a reporter shouted. Victoria stopped, considering. Then she turned to face the cameras, her arm around Lily. "This man," she said clearly, "ran into an inferno to save a child he'd never met. While others fled, and I don't blame them for that, he risked everything to save my daughter. His name is Daniel Hayes, and he's a hero." Daniel felt his face burn with embarrassment. "I'm not a hero, just did what anyone would do." The reporter turned to him, shoving a microphone in his face. "Mr. Hayes, What made you risk your life for a stranger's child? Daniel looked at Emma, then at Lily, still clutching her mother's hand. I'm a parent, he said simply. Any parent would understand. The reporter pressed for more, but Robert the driver intervened, efficiently guiding them to a waiting town car that had somehow appeared in the chaos. As they drove away from Pine Lake, Daniel looked back to see the mountain he'd hiked with Sarah so many times fully engulfed in flames. Their favorite trail, the waterfall where he'd proposed. All of it was gone. But Emma was safe beside him, and somewhere behind them in another car, a little girl named Lily was safe with her mother. In the face of such destruction, that felt like its own kind of miracle. The Riverside Grand Hotel was a different world entirely. Daniel had driven past it countless times but had never imagined actually staying there. The lobby was all marble and crystal chandeliers, and he was acutely aware of his ash-stained clothes and the smell of smoke that clung to him and Emma. But the staff, clearly briefed by someone, Victoria he assumed, treated them like visiting royalty. They were whisked to a suite on the 10th floor that was larger than their entire house. Emma stood in the doorway, mouth agape. Dad, there are 3 bathrooms. Why would anyone need 3 bathrooms? Despite everything, Daniel laughed. I have no idea, Em. Rich people logic, I guess. They took turns showering, washing away the smoke and ash. The hotel had somehow procured clothes for them, jeans and t-shirts in the right sizes, new undergarments, even shoes. Daniel didn't want to think about how much all of this was costing Victoria Langston. That evening, as they ate room service, Emma had ordered mac and cheese, then been stunned when it arrived looking like something from a fancy restaurant rather than the craft box she was used to. Daniel's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. Mr. Hayes? This is Victoria Langston. How did you get my number? There was a pause, then an almost embarrassed laugh. I run a tech company. Getting phone numbers is kind of what we do. I'm sorry, that's probably creepy. I just wanted to check that you and Emma were settled in okay. We're fine, more than fine. This is excessive, honestly. It's inadequate, Victoria countered, but it's a start. I also wanted to let you know your truck was destroyed in the fire. I'm sorry. Daniel had expected as much, but it still hit him hard. That truck had been his and Sarah's first major purchase together, bought used but reliable. Another piece of their life together, gone. I'll have my insurance company contact yours, Victoria continued, to expedite the claim. You don't need to Mr. Hayes, Daniel, please let me do this. I know you don't want charity, and I respect that. But this isn't charity. This is... I don't know what this is, honestly. Gratitude feels too small a word. There was vulnerability in her voice that surprised him. The CEO facade had slipped entirely. How's Lily? He asked, changing the subject. Asleep finally. She won't let go of me, even unconscious. She's always been independent, sometimes to a fault. But tonight, Victoria's voice wavered. She asked me if you were an angel, said you appeared out of the smoke like something from one of her storybooks. Just a dad who knows what it's like to be afraid for your kid. Your wife, Emma mentioned her mother. Is she... She died 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. It's okay. Well, it's not okay, but we're managing. Emma and I, we're a good team. There was a pause, then Victoria said, Lily's father isn't in the picture, never has been. It's just been the 2 of us and whatever nannies or assistants I can hire. But today when I saw that burning car, she took a shaky breath. I realized I've been so focused on providing for her future that I almost missed being present for her today. Daniel understood that guilt too, the working parent's eternal struggle between providing and being present. You were trying to help someone. That's not something to be ashamed of. But I left her alone. And I left Emma alone to save Lily. Sometimes there are no perfect choices, just the best we can do in the moment. They talked for a few more minutes before Victoria had to take another call, something about coordinating relief efforts for other evacuees. After hanging up, Daniel found Emma on the suite's balcony, looking out at the lights of Riverside spread below them. It's weird, isn't it? She said. This morning we were in our normal life, and now we're here in this fancy hotel because you saved someone important. I didn't save her because she was important, Em. I saved her because she was a scared little kid who needed help. Emma leaned against him carefully, mindful of his bandages. I know, that's why you're a hero, even if you don't want to be called one. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. His back pain was manageable with the medication the hospital had provided, but his mind wouldn't quiet. He kept replaying the day, the moment he'd heard Lily's screams, the decision to run toward danger instead of away from it, the feeling of the flames at his back. He thought about Sarah, what she would have said about all of this. She would have teased him about his hero complex, but she also would have been proud. She'd always said he had a protector's heart, that it's what had drawn her to him in the first place. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus at the auto shop. Saw you on the news, brother. You famous now. Shop's gone. Fire got the whole industrial district. But everyone's okay. Call me when you can. The shop gone. His truck gone. Their hiking spots gone. So much destroyed in a single day. But Emma was safe in the next room, and somewhere in this same hotel, Lily was safe with her mother. Against such devastation, those facts felt monumentous. The next morning brought a knock at their door. Daniel opened it to find Robert, Victoria's driver, holding several shopping bags. Ms. Langston thought you and your daughter might need some additional clothing, he said formally. She also asked me to give you this. He handed Daniel an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Daniel, I'm holding a press conference this afternoon about establishing a wildfire relief fund. I would be honored if you and Emma would attend. Not for publicity, but because I want Lily to see that heroes are real, and they look like ordinary people who make extraordinary choices. V. Emma, reading over his shoulder, said, We should go. We're not. Dad, she needs us there. Sometimes being helpful isn't about the big dramatic rescue. Sometimes it's just showing up. Once again, Daniel was struck by his daughter's wisdom. Sarah would have been so proud of who Emma was becoming. The press conference was held in the hotel's main ballroom. Daniel and Emma sat in the back, trying to be inconspicuous, but Lily spotted them immediately and waved enthusiastically. She was wearing a new dress, her hair neatly braided, looking nothing like the terrified child from yesterday. Victoria took the podium with the natural command of someone used to public speaking. But Daniel noticed the way her eyes sought out Lily repeatedly, as if reassuring herself that her daughter was still there, still safe. Yesterday, our community faced one of the worst wildfire disasters in California history, she began. Hundreds of families lost their homes. Businesses were destroyed. Our landscape has been forever changed. But yesterday also showed me the very best of humanity. She spoke about the firefighters, the first responders, the ordinary citizens who had helped their neighbors. Then her voice changed, becoming more personal. Yesterday, my daughter was trapped in a burning vehicle. I had left her, a decision I will regret for the rest of my life. And in those moments when I realized what was happening, I experienced a terror beyond description. But a stranger, a man with his own child to protect, ran into that inferno without hesitation. Daniel felt every eye in the room turn toward him. He wanted to sink into his chair, but Emma held his hand firmly. That man, Victoria continued, asked for nothing in return. When I tried to thank him, he said he was just doing what anyone would do. But that's not true. Heroes are rare, not because heroic actions are impossible, but because they require us to value someone else's life as much as our own. She announced the establishment of the Langston Foundation Wildfire Relief Fund, with an initial commitment of $50 million. But then she added something unexpected. Furthermore, I'm announcing the Daniel Hayes Heroes Fund, which will provide full scholarships to the children of first responders and citizens who demonstrate extraordinary bravery in crisis situations. The first recipient will be Emma Hayes, whose father reminded me yesterday that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite that fear to help others. Emma gasped beside him. Daniel felt his chest tighten with a mix of embarrassment and something else. Gratitude, perhaps, though not for the money. It was the recognition that Emma would have opportunities he couldn't have provided on his own. College without debt. Choices that poverty often eliminated. After the press conference, Victoria found them in the lobby. Lily immediately ran to Emma, the two girls having formed an instant bond the way children do after shared trauma. You didn't have to do that, Daniel said quietly. Yes, I did, Victoria replied, and it's still not enough. It will never be enough. But I need you to understand something. This isn't charity or pity or some rich person's guilt. This is a mother trying to thank the man who gave her daughter back to her." They stood there for a moment, two single parents who had faced the worst possible scenario and come through the other side. Around them, the hotel buzzed with activity: reporters, evacuees, relief workers. But in that moment, it was just two people understanding each other. "There's one more thing," Victoria said. "My company is establishing a disaster response center in Cedar Ridge. We'll need someone to run it, someone who understands the community, who has medical training, who can stay calm in a crisis. The job is yours if you want it." Daniel started to protest, but Victoria held up her hand. "Think about it. Talk to Emma. It's not charity. You're genuinely the most qualified person I can think of for this position. Your military medical training, your connections in the community, and yes, your proven ability to act under pressure. The salary is substantial, but you'd earn every penny." As she walked away with Lily, Emma tugged on Daniel's sleeve. "Dad, you should take it. It feels like a chance to help more people. Like what Mom would want you to do. Like maybe something good can come from something terrible." Daniel looked at his daughter, really looked at her. When had she become so wise? When had she grown from the little girl who needed him to check for monsters under her bed to this thoughtful young woman who understood that pride sometimes needed to yield to practicality? That evening, as they sat in their hotel suite watching the news coverage of the fire, 60% contained, the reporter said, though the damage was already historic, Daniel made his decision. He called Victoria. "I'll take the job," he said without preamble, "but I have conditions." "I'm listening," Victoria said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "The center helps everyone, regardless of income or status. We establish programs for fire prevention education, not just response, and Emma and I find our own place to live. We can't stay in this hotel forever." Agreed on all counts. Although regarding housing, you should know that Cedar Ridge was hit hard. Finding a rental might be challenging. She was right, of course. When Daniel started making calls the next day, he discovered that half the town had been evacuated and many homes were damaged or destroyed. The housing crisis would last months, possibly years. It was Emma who suggested the solution. "Ms. Langston has that big house on Skylark Drive. Lily mentioned it has like 8 bedrooms or something crazy. Maybe we could rent part of it?" When Daniel reluctantly brought up the idea to Victoria, expecting her to politely decline, she surprised him by immediately agreeing. "It's perfect, actually. The main house has a separate wing with its own entrance. You'd have privacy, and honestly, it would be nice to have other people around. That house is too big for just Lily and me." And so, 3 weeks after the fire, Daniel and Emma moved into the east wing of the Langston estate. It felt surreal driving through the gates in a rental car. His insurance had come through, expedited as Victoria had promised. Their few salvaged possessions in the back. The house was even more impressive than Daniel had imagined, not ostentatious, but elegant in an understated way. Their wing had 3 bedrooms, a living area, and a small kitchen. It was more space than they'd had in their old house, but it felt appropriate somehow, not excessive. Lily was waiting for them on the main house steps, practically vibrating with excitement. "Emma, I can show you my art studio and the pool, and we have a tire swing in the back." As the girls ran off together, Victoria stood beside Daniel, watching them go. "They're good for each other," she observed. "Yeah, they are." "This is strange, isn't it?" Victoria said with a self-deprecating laugh. "A few weeks ago, we didn't know each other existed, and now we're connected by the worst and best day of our lives," Daniel finished. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their daughters explore the garden. The mountains in the distance still showed the scars of the fire, blackened slopes where green forests once stood. But already, Daniel knew, life was beginning to return. Fire was part of the natural cycle here, destruction making way for new growth. Over the following months, Daniel threw himself into establishing the Disaster Response Center. He hired local paramedics and firefighters, organized community training sessions, and created evacuation protocols that would prevent the chaos they'd experienced on Highway 38. Victoria proved to be a valuable partner, using her resources and connections to cut through red tape that would have taken him years to navigate. But she was careful never to override his decisions, respecting his expertise and his connection to the community. The girls became inseparable. Emma helped Lily with her violin practice. It turned out Lily had been taking lessons too, while Lily introduced Emma to the world of competitive swimming, something available at the private school Victoria had enrolled Emma in, with Daniel's grudging acceptance that his daughter deserved opportunities he couldn't have otherwise provided. One evening, 6 months after the fire, Daniel was reviewing evacuation plans in the estate's main kitchen when Victoria came in, looking exhausted from a board meeting. "Long day?" he asked. "The longest. Sometimes I think running into a burning building would be easier than dealing with venture capitalists." Daniel laughed. "Having done both, I can safely say you're wrong." Victoria poured herself a glass of wine, then, after a pause, poured one for Daniel too. They developed an easy friendship over the months, built on mutual respect and their shared devotion to their daughters. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said, settling onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. "Why did you really do it? Run into that fire? And don't say anyone would have. We both know that's not true." Daniel considered the question, swirling the wine in his glass. "When Sarah was dying, I made her a promise. I told her I'd raise Emma to be kind, to be brave, to help others when she could. How could I teach her those things if I didn't live them myself?" "That's beautiful," Victoria said softly. "What about you? What makes someone leave their tech empire to stand in a hotel ballroom and pledge $50 million to strangers?" Victoria smiled ruefully. "Guilt, partially, but also perspective. I spent so many years building walls around Lily and me, financial walls, social walls, thinking they would keep us safe. But that fire showed me that real safety comes from community, from people willing to help each other. Your act of selflessness saved my daughter, but it also opened my eyes." They were interrupted by laughter from the living room, where the girls were attempting to teach each other TikTok dances. Daniel and Victoria moved to the doorway, watching their daughters with the soft smiles of parents seeing their children truly happy. "They're planning our wedding, you know," Victoria said casually, taking a sip of her wine. Daniel nearly choked on his. "What?" "Oh yes. Lily informed me yesterday that it would be super convenient if we got married because then they'd be real sisters and wouldn't have to explain to people why they live in the same house but have different last names." Emma said something similar. Apparently they've already picked out their bridesmaids' dresses. They both laughed, but there was something else in the air, an acknowledgement of a possibility neither had seriously considered before. They'd been focused on healing, on building new lives from the ashes of trauma and loss. But watching their daughters together, seeing how naturally the four of them had become a unit, it was impossible not to wonder. "For what it's worth," Victoria said quietly, "I can think of worse ideas." Daniel looked at her, really looked at her. Not as the billionaire CEO, not as the woman whose daughter he'd saved, but as Victoria, brilliant, funny, devoted to her daughter, generous with her wealth but careful with her trust. Someone who understood loss and single parenthood, and the weight of being responsible for another human being's happiness. "Yeah," he said softly. "So can I." They didn't talk about it again that night, or for many nights after. But something had shifted. A door had been opened. They began having dinner together as a family more often. Daniel taught Victoria basic first aid at the response center. Victoria taught Daniel about the business side of disaster management, knowledge that made him more effective in his role. The first anniversary of the Cedar Ridge Fire, as it came to be known, was marked with a memorial service. Daniel stood with the other first responders and citizen heroes, uncomfortable with the attention but understanding its importance for the community's healing. Victoria spoke at the service, as she had at many events over the past year. But this time she told a different story. "A year ago I thought strength meant independence, success meant isolation, and safety meant control. But a single father running into a wildfire to save a stranger's child taught me that real strength is interdependence, real success is community, and real safety comes from people willing to risk everything for each other." After the service, as people milled around the memorial garden that had been planted where the auto shop once stood, Lily and Emma performed a violin duet they'd been practicing for months. The music drifted across the gathering, a melody of loss and hope intertwined. Marcus, Daniel's old colleague from the shop, clapped him on the shoulder. "Look at you now. running the whole disaster response center. Sarah would be so proud. I hope so, Daniel said, his eyes finding Emma in the crowd. And that Victoria Langston, she's something else. Daniel didn't respond, but his silence said everything. That evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Daniel and Victoria sat on the porch of the main house, looking out at the mountains. New growth was visible even from this distance, patches of green among the blackened trees, nature's promise of renewal. The girls are getting older, Victoria observed, less subtle about their matchmaking attempts. Emma left a wedding magazine on my pillow yesterday. It was open to an article about second marriages. Victoria laughed. Lily has been practicing writing Emma and Lily Langston Hayes in her notebook. Hyphenated, very modern. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from true intimacy. Not romantic, not yet, but something deeper. Two people who had seen each other at their most vulnerable and chosen to build something together from that foundation. I've been thinking, Victoria said finally, about what you said that night in the hotel. About there being no perfect choices, just the best we can do in the moment. Yeah? I think maybe that applies to more than just crisis situations. Maybe it applies to life, to moving forward, to taking chances even when we're scared. Daniel turned to look at her. In the soft porch light, she looked younger, more vulnerable than the CEO who commanded boardrooms and press conferences. What are you saying, Victoria? I'm saying that a year ago, you ran into a fire for a stranger, and maybe it's time I took a similar leap of faith. She reached over and took his hand. It was the first time they'd touched intentionally, not in crisis or casual passing, but with purpose and possibility. I'm not Sarah, she said quietly. And you're not looking for a replacement for her, but maybe we could be something new, something neither of us expected, but both of us need. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. The girls would be thrilled, Victoria finished. But this isn't about them, not really. This is about us, about whether we're brave enough to try. Daniel thought about Sarah then, about the promise he'd made to live bravely, to show Emma what courage looked like. Sometimes courage was running into a fire. Sometimes it was opening your heart again when loss had taught you how much that could hurt. Okay, he said simply. Okay? Let's try. Slow, careful, with the girls' well-being always first. But yes, let's try. Victoria's smile was radiant, transforming her face in a way that made Daniel's chest tighten with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. Not love? Not yet. But the possibility of it, like green shoots pushing through scorched earth. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't need to. They just sat together, hands linked, watching the stars appear over the mountains, two people who had found each other in the worst possible circumstances and chosen to build something beautiful from the ashes. Inside the house, unbeknownst to them, two girls watched from an upstairs window, grinning and high-fiving silently. Their plan, months in the making, was finally working. I told you they just needed time, Emma whispered. And a little push, Lily added. A lot of pushes. They giggled, already imagining themselves as sisters, already planning a future that their parents were only beginning to envision. But children often see more clearly than adults, unburdened by fear and past pain. They saw what Daniel and Victoria were only starting to understand, that sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the places where fire has cleared the way. The weeks that followed their conversation on the porch unfolded with a delicate grace that surprised them both. Daniel and Victoria navigated their new understanding with the careful attention of people who had learned how precious and fragile happiness could be. They didn't announce anything to the girls, didn't make grand declarations or sudden changes. Instead, they simply allowed themselves to exist in this new space between friendship and something more. It was a Tuesday morning when everything shifted again. Daniel was at the Disaster Response Center, running a training simulation with his team, when his phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen usually meant a quick question about dinner plans or picking up the girls from school. But when he answered, her voice carried an edge of panic he'd never heard before, not even during the fire. Daniel, it's Lily. She's at Cedar Ridge General. She collapsed at school. The words hit him like a physical blow. He was already moving, grabbing his keys, barking orders to his assistant to take over the training. I'm on my way. What happened? They don't know yet. She was in PE class and just fell. She's conscious now, but Daniel, I'm scared. Her voice cracked on the last word, the CEO facade completely shattered. I'll pick up Emma and meet you there. Victoria, breathe. She's going to be okay. But even as he said it, Daniel felt the familiar clench of fear that every parent knows. The understanding that you can't actually promise that, can't guarantee your child's safety, no matter how much you want to. Emma was waiting in the school office when he arrived, her face pale with worry. The school had already informed her about Lily's collapse, the two girls being each other's emergency contacts at school, a detail that now seemed both touching and prescient. Is she okay? Emma asked immediately, climbing into the car. We're going to find out. Your mom would say that worrying before we have facts doesn't help anyone. Emma nodded, but Daniel could see her hands trembling slightly. Over the past year, she and Lily had become more than friends. They were sisters in every way that mattered, and the thought of losing another person she loved was written clearly across his daughter's face. The hospital waiting room was a study in controlled chaos. Victoria stood near the window, still in her business suit from a morning meeting, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke rapidly to someone. When she saw them, she ended the call immediately and crossed to them. They're running tests, she said without preamble. Heart monitors, blood work, everything. The doctor said it could be anything from dehydration to... She stopped, unable to voice the worst possibilities. Daniel took her hand without thinking, a gesture that would have felt presumptuous weeks ago but now felt necessary, natural. What exactly happened? The school said she was running laps, just normal PE activities. Then she stopped suddenly, said she felt dizzy, and collapsed. She was only unconscious for a few seconds, but Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. What if it's something serious? What if I've been so focused on work that I missed signs that something was wrong? Stop, Daniel said firmly, recognizing the spiral of parental guilt. This isn't your fault. Kids don't always tell us when something's wrong, and some things don't have warning signs. Emma moved to Victoria's other side, taking her free hand. Lily's tough. She's going to be okay. The three of them stood there, linked by hands and worry, when a doctor emerged from the emergency department. Dr. Patel was someone Daniel knew from the disaster response training, a competent, caring physician who didn't sugarcoat but also didn't catastrophize. Miss Langston, Lily's stable and asking for you. We've run preliminary tests and I'd like to discuss the results with you. Victoria's grip on Daniel's hand tightened. Can they come? They're family. Dr. Patel nodded, leading them to a consultation room. Through the window, Daniel could see Lily in a hospital bed, looking small and pale but alert, a nurse checking her IV line. The good news, Dr. Patel began, is that Lily's immediate danger has passed. Her vitals are stable, and she's responding well. However, the tests have revealed something concerning. Lily has a cardiac arrhythmia, specifically a form of long QT syndrome. Victoria made a sound like she'd been punched. Daniel shifted closer, his arm going around her shoulders automatically. It's a hereditary condition, Dr. Patel continued. It affects the heart's electrical system and can cause sudden, irregular heartbeats. Today's episode was likely triggered by the physical exertion combined with dehydration. The condition is manageable with medication and lifestyle adjustments, but it will require monitoring and some restrictions on intense physical activities. But she'll be okay, Emma asked, her young voice cutting through the medical terminology to the heart of what mattered. Dr. Patel smiled gently. With proper management, yes. Many people with long QT syndrome live completely normal lives. We'll need to do some genetic testing, check family history, and develop a treatment plan. Has anyone in your family had similar issues, Ms. Langston? Victoria shook her head numbly. My parents died in a car accident when I was young. I don't know much about their medical history. We'll work with what we have, Dr. Patel assured her. For now, Lily needs to stay overnight for monitoring. You can see her, but try to keep her calm. As they entered Lily's room, the little girl's face lit up despite her obvious exhaustion. Mom, Mr. Daniel, Emma. Then, with the startling perception children sometimes display, she added, I'm okay. The doctor said so. Victoria rushed to her daughter's side, carefully embracing her around the monitoring wires. You scared us, baby. I scared myself, Lily admitted. 1 minute I was running, and then the world went all sparkly and sideways. Emma climbed onto the bed's other side, careful not to jostle anything. You're going to be fine. They'll figure out exactly what's wrong and fix it. As the girls talked quietly, Victoria and Daniel stepped back slightly, giving them space while staying close. Victoria's professional mask had completely crumbled, leaving her vulnerable and shaken in a way that reminded Daniel of his own terror during Sarah's diagnosis. I can't lose her, Victoria whispered. She's everything. You're not going to lose her, Daniel said firmly. This is manageable. It's scary, yes, but it's not a death sentence. We'll get through this. Victoria looked at him sharply. We? Daniel met her gaze steadily. We. You're not alone in this, Victoria. Not anymore. Something shifted in her expression. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper that made Daniel's chest tighten. She leaned into him slightly, allowing herself to be supported, and he understood that for someone like Victoria, accepting help was its own form of trust. They spent the night at the hospital, taking shifts sitting with Lily so she was never alone. Emma curled up in the room's recliner, refusing to leave her sister. Around 3 a.m, when Lily was sleeping peacefully and Emma had finally dozed off, Daniel found Victoria standing in the hallway, staring at the cardiac unit's educational posters without really seeing them. Sarah was in the same ward, he said quietly, joining her. Different room, but same hallway. I memorized every poster, every crack in the ceiling tile, every sound the machines made. How did you do it? Victoria asked. How did you stay strong for Emma while watching Sarah fade? I didn't always. Some nights I sat in my truck in the parking garage and screamed at God, at fate, at the unfairness of it all. But then I'd go back upstairs and Sarah would smile at me and Emma would need help with her homework, and I'd remember that falling apart was a luxury I couldn't afford. Victoria turned to face him fully. But this is different, right? Lily's condition. It's manageable. She's not. No, Daniel said firmly. This is nothing like that. Lily is going to be fine. She'll have to be careful, take medication, maybe give up competitive swimming, but she'll live a full, normal life. Competitive swimming, Victoria repeated, and suddenly she was crying, not the controlled tears of earlier, but deep, wrenching sobs. She loves swimming. It's her thing, her passion. How do I tell her she can't do the thing she loves most? Daniel pulled her into his arms without hesitation, feeling her shake against him. You tell her the truth. That life sometimes requires us to change direction, but that doesn't mean the new path can't be just as fulfilling. Maybe she can't compete, but she can still swim. Maybe she becomes a coach or finds a new passion. Kids are resilient, especially kids like Lily, who have parents who love them as fiercely as you do. Victoria pulled back slightly, looking up at him with tear-stained eyes. When did you become so wise? Trauma is a hell of a teacher, Daniel said with a rueful smile, though I don't recommend the curriculum. Despite everything, Victoria laughed, a watery, broken sound, but genuine. Daniel Hayes, you are not what I expected when I imagined falling in love again. The words hung between them, unexpected and profound. Victoria's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't meant to say them out loud, but Daniel didn't let her retreat, didn't let her take them back. Neither are you, he said simply. But here we are. Here we are, she agreed, and when he kissed her forehead gently, a gesture of comfort and promise, she leaned into it like a plant seeking sun. The next morning brought better news. Lily's overnight monitoring had been stable, and Dr. Patel was optimistic about her treatment plan. They gathered in her room as he explained the medications, the need for regular cardiac checkups, and the lifestyle adjustments. No more competitive swimming, Lily said quietly when he finished. It wasn't a question. I'm afraid not, Dr. Patel confirmed gently. The intense physical stress could trigger another episode, but recreational swimming with proper precautions should be fine. Lily nodded, processing this with a maturity beyond her 8 years. Then she looked at Emma. I guess I'll have more time for violin now. Emma squeezed her hand. We could start a duo. Perform at school events and stuff. The Hayes Langston musical experience. Lily said with a small smile. Langston Hayes, Emma countered. Alphabetical order. They began a mock argument that had everyone laughing, the tension in the room finally breaking. But Daniel noticed Victoria watching her daughter with a mix of pride and sorrow, seeing the dreams Lily was quietly putting aside with such grace. Over the next few weeks, life reorganized itself around Lily's condition. The estate's pool house was converted into a music studio where both girls could practice. Lily threw herself into violin with the same intensity she'd once devoted to swimming. And while Victoria worried about this transference of competitive drive, Daniel recognized it as healthy adaptation. The Disaster Response Center became a second home for both girls after school. Lily, unable to participate in sports, became Daniel's unofficial assistant, learning about emergency protocols and medical procedures with an intensity that surprised everyone. She had inherited her mother's brilliant mind and organizational skills, and she applied them to understanding everything about emergency response. One afternoon, as Daniel was teaching a CPR class to community volunteers, he noticed Lily watching intently from the observation room. During the break, she approached him with her notebook. She'd started carrying one everywhere, just like her mother. Mr. Daniel, I've been thinking, she began seriously. If my heart problem is hereditary, there might be other kids who have it but don't know. What if we could screen student athletes before they start sports? Daniel stared at her, struck by the insight. That's actually a brilliant idea, Lily. Mom always says to look for opportunities in obstacles, Lily said matter-of-factly. My obstacle could help other kids. That evening, Daniel shared Lily's idea with Victoria over dinner. They'd been eating together as a family every night since the hospital incident, a routine that had developed naturally without discussion. She wants to turn her diagnosis into something positive, Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. God, she's incredible. She gets that from her mother, Daniel said, causing Victoria to look at him sharply. The ability to transform challenge into opportunity? To see beyond personal setback to community benefit? That's all you, Victoria. Emma, who had been quietly eating her pasta, suddenly spoke up. You two are really bad at this. Bad at what? Victoria asked. Pretending you're not together. Everyone knows. Mrs. Chen next door asked me when the wedding was yesterday. Lily nodded enthusiastically. The grocery store clerk called Mr. Daniel your boyfriend last week, Mom, and you didn't correct her. Daniel and Victoria exchanged glances, caught by their two perceptive daughters. We've been taking things slow, Victoria began carefully. Because of us, Emma said. It wasn't a question. You're worried about how we'll handle it. Your feelings are the most important thing, Daniel said firmly. The girls looked at each other, seeming to have an entire conversation without words. Then Lily spoke for both of them. Our feelings are that you two are being silly. We've been trying to get you together for over a year. We already feel like sisters. The only people making this complicated are you. Out of the mouths of babes, Victoria murmured. Emma stood up, walked around the table, and hugged Daniel from behind. Dad, you deserve to be happy. Mom would want that. Then she moved to Victoria, offering the same embrace. And you make him happy. You make both of us happy. Lily joined them, creating an impromptu family hug that left all four of them teary-eyed. When they finally separated, Daniel cleared his throat. So, I guess we're doing this? I guess we are, Victoria agreed, laughing through her tears. The transition from careful friendship to acknowledged relationship was surprisingly smooth. They'd already been functioning as a family unit. Now they just stopped pretending otherwise. Daniel officially moved from the East Wing into the main house, though he kept his office in the separate space. They attended school functions together, no longer careful to arrive separately. The Disaster Response Center staff, who had been placing bets on when they'd finally admit their feelings, welcomed the development with knowing smiles. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were adjustments, negotiations, the delicate dance of blending two families who had functioned independently for so long. Daniel struggled with the wealth disparity, uncomfortable with the expensive restaurants and charity galas that were part of Victoria's world. Victoria had to learn to step back from her CEO mode at home, to let Daniel take the lead on certain decisions without feeling like she was losing control. The girls, meanwhile, thrived. Emma's grades improved with access to better educational resources, and she discovered a love for science that Daniel's limited budget never could have nurtured. Lily found purpose in her health advocacy idea, working with Victoria to establish the Lily Langston Heart Screening Initiative, which would provide free cardiac screening for student athletes throughout California. 6 months after Lily's diagnosis, they held the first screening event at Cedar Ridge High School. Over 200 students were tested, and 3 were found to have previously undiagnosed cardiac conditions. One, a star basketball player named Marcus, coincidentally the son of Daniel's former coworker, had the same long QT syndrome as Lily. "You saved my son's life," Marcus Sr. told Daniel afterward, tears in his eyes. "If Lily hadn't started this program, Lily saved him," Daniel corrected. "She saw opportunity where others might have seen only limitation." That night, as they celebrated the screening's success with pizza and ice cream, Lily's choice, Victoria raised her glass of soda in a toast. To Lily, who turned a setback into a setup for helping others. To Emma, Lily countered, who showed me that sisters don't have to be blood-related. To Daniel, Emma added, who taught us that heroes don't wear capes, they just show up when needed. And to Victoria, Daniel concluded, who proves every day that strength and vulnerability can coexist beautifully. They clinked glasses, laughing at their own sentimentality, but Daniel caught Victoria's eye across the table, and that look was everything they'd been through, the terror of the fire, the fear of Lily's diagnosis, the slow building of trust and love from the ashes of their previous lives. Later that evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Daniel and Victoria sat on the same porch where they'd first acknowledged their feelings. The mountains had recovered more now, green overtaking black, though the fire scars would remain visible for years. "I've been thinking about something," Victoria said carefully. "Should I be worried?" "Maybe." She turned to face him fully. "How would you feel about making this official?" Daniel's heart skipped. "Official how?" "The full deal. Marriage, legal adoption of each other's daughters, the whole complicated, beautiful mess of it." Daniel was quiet for a moment, not because he was uncertain, but because the magnitude of the moment deserved consideration. "The girls would be ecstatic, you know that. Your world, the CEO stuff, the media attention, can be managed. I've been managing it my whole adult life." "The prenup your lawyers will insist on," Victoria laughed, "already drafted. You get nothing if we divorce except the standard California 50-50 split of assets acquired during marriage. Sorry to disappoint if you were marrying me for my money." "Damn, there goes my master plan," Daniel said dryly, then grew serious. "Victoria, are you sure? I'm not your usual type. I'm not a CEO or a tech mogul or whatever else usually orbits your world." "No," Victoria agreed. "You're better. You're real. You're good in a way that has nothing to do with performance or appearance. You make me want to be better, not at business, but at life. And you love my daughter as your own, just as I love Emma." "When you put it like that," Daniel said softly, "how can I say anything but yes?" Victoria's smile was radiant. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes to everything. Marriage, adoption, the full complicated, beautiful mess of it." This time, when they kissed, it wasn't gentle or cautious. It was a promise, a seal on a future neither had imagined, but both now couldn't imagine living without. The wedding, held 8 months later in the rebuilt memorial garden where the auto shop had stood, was small by Victoria's usual standards, but perfect by any measure that mattered. Emma and Lily served as co-maids of honor, wearing matching dresses they'd picked out themselves after only 12 shopping trips and approximately 300 disagreements about shade of blue. Marcus Sr. served as Daniel's best man, joking in his speech about how Daniel had gone from changing oil to marrying oil money, though everyone knew the real treasure Daniel had found was family. Victoria's CFO, one of her few close friends, spoke about watching Victoria transform from a guarded, work-obsessed single mother to someone who understood that success meant more than stock prices and market shares. But the moment that brought tears to everyone's eyes was when the girls stood up to speak together. "3 years ago, we both lost something precious," Emma began. "I lost my mom, and Lily never had a dad to lose. But then a fire brought us together," Lily continued. "It destroyed a lot, but from those ashes grew something amazing. A family, they said in unison. Not perfect, not simple, but real, and ours. They presented Daniel and Victoria with a gift, a photo album they'd created secretly, filled with pictures from the past 2 years. The first photo was from the hospital after the fire, all 4 of them covered in ash and bandages, but together. The last was from the previous week, all of them in the pool, Lily floating safely in the shallow end while Emma practiced her emerging backstroke technique. As Daniel and Victoria exchanged vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish not just each other, but the family they'd built from tragedy and triumph, Daniel thought about Sarah. He could almost hear her voice, warm with approval, telling him this was exactly what she'd wanted, for him and Emma to find happiness again, to be part of something bigger than their grief. "You saved my daughter," Victoria said through her vows. "But more than that, you saved me from a life half-lived, focused on achievement but missing the point. You taught me that real courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about choosing love despite the fear." "You gave my daughter opportunities I never could have," Daniel responded in his vows. "But more than that, you gave both of us a reason to believe in second chances. You showed me that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means honoring it by living fully in the present." When they were pronounced married, when they kissed as husband and wife while their daughters cheered and their friends applauded, the mountains stood witness, scarred but healing, forever changed but still standing, still beautiful in their resilience. The reception was held at the Disaster Response Center, transformed with lights and flowers, but still recognizably the place where Daniel had built his new career. It seemed fitting, this building that represented rebirth, second chances, and the power of community coming together in crisis. As the evening wound down, Daniel found himself standing outside looking up at the stars, the same stars he'd watched the night of the fire, when everything had seemed lost. Marcus joined him, beer in hand. "Hell of a journey from that day on the mountain," Marcus observed. "Sometimes I can barely believe it's real," Daniel admitted. "Sarah would be proud. You know that, right? Not just of what you've built, but of who you've become." Before Daniel could respond, small arms wrapped around his waist from behind. Lily, still in her maid of honor dress, but now sporting sneakers instead of the formal shoes Victoria had insisted on for the ceremony. "Dad?" she said tentatively, the title still new on her lips. She'd been calling him Mr. Daniel for so long that the transition was gradual. "Mom wants to know if you're ready for the father-daughter dance." "2 daughters, 2 dances," Daniel said, scooping her up despite her laughing protest that she was too old for that. "Though technically now it's just a regular dance since you're officially my daughter too." "The papers aren't signed yet," Lily pointed out with her mother's precision. "The papers are just paperwork. You've been my daughter since the day you started leaving your homework at my desk in the response center and expecting me to check it." Lily hugged him tighter. "I love you, Dad." "Love you too, kiddo. Now let's go dance before your mom sends out a search party." They returned to the reception to find Emma and Victoria already on the dance floor, Emma standing on Victoria's feet as they swayed to the music, both of them laughing. When the song changed, they switched partners, Daniel with Emma, Victoria with Lily, then all 4 of them together in a circle that looked ridiculous and felt perfect. "We're really doing this," Emma said, looking around at her new complete family. "We really are," Victoria confirmed. "Best plot twist ever," Lily declared, making them all laugh. As the evening ended and guests began departing, offering congratulations and well wishes, Daniel noticed someone standing at the edge of the celebration, a woman in her 50s, well-dressed but hesitant, as if unsure of her welcome. Victoria followed his gaze and gasped softly. "Aunt Margaret?" The woman stepped forward nervously. "I saw the announcement in the paper. I know we haven't spoken since you started the company, but I wanted to wish you well." Daniel knew the story. Margaret was Victoria's only surviving relative, her mother's sister who had disapproved of Victoria's decision to raise Lily alone, who had said harsh things about single motherhood and unconventional choices. They'd been estranged for years. Victoria stood frozen for a moment, then looked at Daniel. He squeezed her hand gently, a silent support for whatever decision she made. "Aunt Margaret," Victoria said finally, stepping forward, "thank you for coming. This is my husband Daniel, and our daughters Emma and Lily." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She looks just like your mother, she said, looking at Lily. And I was wrong, Victoria, about everything. You've built something beautiful here. It was an olive branch, unexpected and tentative. Victoria took it. Would you like to stay for cake? She offered. The girls would love to hear stories about their grandmother. As Margaret was welcomed into their circle, as the girls peppered her with questions about Victoria's childhood, Daniel realized this was what healing looked like. Not just from trauma, but from all the breaks and fractures life created. It was messy and imperfect, but it was also beautiful in its humanity. The night ended with the four of them, 5 now, with Aunt Margaret, sitting around a table covered in cake crumbs and half-empty champagne glasses, looking through Margaret's phone at old photos of Victoria's parents, giving the girls a connection to grandparents they'd never know. They would have loved this, Margaret said softly. Your mother always said the best things in life came from the worst situations if you were brave enough to rebuild. Daniel and Victoria exchanged glances over their daughters' heads. From the ashes of a wildfire, from loss and fear and unlikely heroism, they'd built this. A family that shouldn't exist but did. A love that had grown from the most unlikely soil. The morning after the wedding dawned bright and clear, a rarity for Northern California in late spring. Daniel woke to find Victoria already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching him with a soft expression he'd rarely seen during her CEO moments. The early sunlight streaming through their bedroom window caught the gold in her hair, making her look younger, more vulnerable than the woman who commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. Having second thoughts? He asked, voice rough with sleep. Never, she replied, tracing a finger along the scar on his shoulder from the fire. Just thinking about how different this morning is from what I imagined my life would be 5 years ago. Better or worse? Different, she said thoughtfully. I had everything planned out, you know. Lily would go to the best schools, I'd grow the company to a certain valuation by 40, we'd be successful by every metric that mattered in my world. But I never planned for happiness. It wasn't even on my radar as something to pursue. Daniel pulled her closer, understanding intimately what she meant. After Sarah's death, he'd operated on survival mode for so long that the concept of thriving, of genuine joy, had seemed like a betrayal of grief. But here they were, 2 broken people who'd found a way to build something whole from their damaged pieces. Their quiet moment was interrupted by a knock on the door, followed immediately by 2 girls bursting in without waiting for permission. Emma and Lily, still in their pajamas, jumped onto the bed with the coordination of those who'd planned this ambush. First official morning as a legal family, Lily announced, bouncing slightly on the mattress. We've been a family for a while now, Victoria reminded her, but she was smiling. Yeah, but now it's paperwork official, Emma said pragmatically. Which means when I get in trouble at school, they have to call both of you. Why would you get in trouble at school? Daniel asked, raising an eyebrow. Emma grinned. I'm not saying I will. I'm just saying the option is now more administratively complex. The 4 of them lay there for a moment, a tangle of limbs and laughter, before the day's responsibilities inevitably intruded. But first they had a honeymoon to navigate, or rather, a family vacation, since neither Daniel nor Victoria had felt comfortable leaving the girls behind so soon after making their family official. They'd chosen Hawaii, a compromise between adventure and relaxation, with enough activities to keep the girls entertained but also quiet beaches where they could simply exist as a family without the weight of their respective responsibilities. The Disaster Response Center was in capable hands, and Victoria had, for the first time in her professional life, delegated completely to her executive team. The flight to Maui was an education in their different worlds colliding. Daniel, who'd flown military transport and occasionally economy class, watched with bemused fascination as Victoria navigated first-class travel with the girls. Lily was used to it, barely looking up from her book as the flight attendant offered her warm cookies and fresh juice. Emma, meanwhile, was documenting everything with the wonder of someone experiencing luxury for the first time. The seats turn into beds, she whispered to Daniel in amazement. I know, Em. Pretty wild, right? Mom would have laughed so hard at this, Emma said, and for once, mentioning Sarah didn't bring a stab of pain, but rather a warm nostalgia. Remember when we flew to Phoenix that one time and she smuggled sandwiches onto the plane because airport food was too expensive? Daniel laughed. She made us eat them in the bathroom so the flight attendants wouldn't see. Victoria, overhearing, reached across the aisle to squeeze his hand. She'd become adept at navigating these moments when Sarah's memory surfaced, understanding that Daniel's past wasn't something to be jealous of, but rather honored as part of what made him who he was. The resort in Maui was another level of luxury entirely, with a private beach, multiple pools, and activities ranging from snorkeling to traditional luau's. Their suite had 2 bedrooms and a living area larger than Daniel's old house, with a view of the ocean that seemed almost artificially perfect. "This is insane," Daniel said, stepping onto the balcony. "This is normal for some people," Victoria corrected, joining him. "Which I realize sounds obnoxious, but it's true. This was my normal before you. And now?" "Now normal is family dinners where Emma teaches us military acronyms and Lily corrects everyone's grammar. Normal is you coming home covered in dirt from a training exercise and kissing me anyway. Normal is better." Their first full day in Hawaii started with snorkeling lessons. Lily, despite her swimming restrictions, could participate in the gentle, guided activity with careful monitoring. She wore a special vest that would keep her afloat if anything happened, and both Daniel and Victoria stayed close to her in the water. But she didn't need them. She moved through the water with natural grace, pointing out fish to Emma, who was less confident in the ocean despite being the stronger swimmer now. "Look, a sea turtle!" Lily called out, her voice muffled by the snorkel. They floated together, watching the ancient creature glide past with prehistoric elegance. Daniel felt Victoria's hand find his underwater, a connection that said everything about how far they'd come. From strangers on a burning mountain to this moment of perfect peace, their daughters safe and happy beside them. That evening at the resort's restaurant, they encountered another family that would unexpectedly change their trajectory. The Nakamuras, Dr. James Nakamura, his wife Linda, and their twin boys were seated at the adjacent table. What started as polite conversation about the menu evolved into something more when Dr. Nakamura mentioned his work. "I'm a pediatric cardiologist," he said, and immediately had Victoria's attention. "I specialize in genetic cardiac conditions, actually. I'm here presenting at a medical conference." The conversation that followed was intense and technical, with Dr. Nakamura explaining new treatments for long QT syndrome that were showing remarkable promise. He gave Victoria his card, offering to consult on Lily's case when they returned to California. "It's not a cure," he said carefully, "but these new protocols have allowed many of my young patients to return to competitive sports with proper monitoring." Lily, who'd been quietly listening while pretending to focus on her pasta, looked up sharply. "Really? I could swim again? Like, actually swim?" "Possibly," Dr. Nakamura said gently. "Each case is different, but the research is promising." That night, Lily couldn't sleep from excitement. She crept into Daniel and Victoria's room around midnight, crawling between them in the bed. "What if I could swim again?" she whispered into the darkness. "Then you'd swim," Victoria said simply. "But, Lily, we need to be careful not to get our hopes up too high." "I know," Lily said. But Daniel could hear the hope in her voice anyway. "But maybe, right? Maybe?" "Maybe," Daniel agreed, pulling her close. "And maybe is better than no." Emma joined them shortly after, claiming she heard voices and felt left out. The 4 of them lay in the king-sized bed, listening to the ocean through the open balcony doors. It was one of those moments Daniel wanted to crystallize, to hold forever, his entire world contained in this one bed, safe and together. The rest of their Hawaii trip passed in a blur of activities and quiet moments. They went ziplining through the rainforest, Emma and Lily screaming with delight as they soared through the canopy. They attended a traditional luau, where Daniel was pulled on stage to attempt hula dancing, much to his family's amusement. They built elaborate sandcastles that the tide inevitably claimed, a lesson in impermanence that felt oddly profound. On their last night, they sat on the beach watching the sunset. Emma and Lily had run ahead to look for shells, leaving Daniel and Victoria alone on their blanket. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said suddenly. Daniel's stomach clenched. Her tone was serious, almost nervous. "Okay, I want another baby." The words hung in the air between them. Daniel turned to look at her fully, seeing the vulnerability in her expression. "I know we haven't discussed it, she continued quickly. And if you don't want to, that's okay. We have two beautiful girls already. But I'm 38, you're 41, and if we're going to do this— Yes, Daniel said simply. Victoria blinked. Just like that? Just like that. Although, he added with a grin, your pregnancy might interfere with your CEO schedule. She hit him lightly on the arm. I can run a company and grow a human simultaneously. I'm very talented. I don't doubt it, Daniel said, pulling her close. But are you sure? The girls are already older. We'd be starting over with diapers and sleepless nights. And first smiles and first steps and all of it? Victoria finished. Yes, I'm sure. The question is whether you're sure. You've already raised one baby without Sarah. Are you ready to do the baby stage with me? Daniel thought about it seriously. The late nights, the crying, the complete upheaval of their just stabilized routine. Then he thought about a baby with Victoria's eyes and maybe his stubborn chin, about Emma and Lily as big sisters, about their family growing not from tragedy but from choice, from love, from abundance rather than loss. I'm ready, he said. Let's do it. Victoria kissed him then, deep and full of promise, just as their daughters came running back with shells and stories about a crab they'd seen. The girls showed off their treasures, oblivious to the momentous decision their parents had just made, focused only on the present moment and which shell was the prettiest. Returning home from Hawaii brought them back to reality with a sharp landing. The Disaster Response Center had handled a minor crisis in Daniel's absence, a small wildfire in the eastern part of the county that had required evacuation of 2 neighborhoods. His team had managed it perfectly, but Daniel still felt guilty for not being there. You can't be on call 24/7 for the rest of your life, Victoria pointed out as he reviewed the incident reports at their kitchen table. I know, but no buts. You're building something sustainable, which means it has to function without you sometimes. Otherwise, what's the point? She was right, of course. Part of him was still operating from the scarcity mindset of his old life, where taking a vacation meant lost wages, where being irreplaceable was job security. But this was different. He was building something larger than himself, something that needed to outlast him. 2 weeks after their return, they met with Dr. Nakamura at his office in San Francisco. He'd reviewed all of Lily's medical files and had a treatment plan that made Victoria grip Daniel's hand tight enough to hurt. The new medication regime combined with the implantable monitor would allow for gradual return to physical activity, he explained. We'd start slow, build up over months, but there's no reason Lily couldn't eventually return to competitive swimming with proper precautions. Lily was vibrating with excitement in her chair. When can we start? If your parents agree, we could begin the new protocol next week. The drive home was filled with Lily's chatter about getting back in the pool, about competitions she'd missed, about how she'd have to rebuild her stamina. Emma, sitting beside her, was quieter, and Daniel caught her expression in the rearview mirror, happy for her sister, but worried too. You okay, Em? He asked. What if something happens? What if she collapses in the pool? That's why we have the monitor, Lily said impatiently. It'll alert everyone if my heart does something weird. But, Emma, Victoria interrupted gently, I understand your fear. I feel it too. But we can't let fear keep us from living. Your dad taught me that when he ran into a fire instead of away from it. That evening, as they filled out the paperwork to begin Lily's new treatment, Victoria's phone rang. It was her CFO, and from Victoria's expression, the news wasn't good. What kind of breach? She asked sharply, shifting immediately into CEO mode. Daniel took the girls to their music room, giving Victoria space for what was clearly a crisis. But he could hear her voice through the walls, authoritative and decisive as she coordinated a response to what sounded like a major cyber attack on her company. An hour later, she emerged looking exhausted. I have to go to the office. It's bad. Someone got into our client databases. Go, Daniel said immediately. We've got everything here. She kissed him gratefully, then each of the girls before rushing out. Daniel wouldn't see her again for 3 days as she managed the crisis, sleeping in her office, managing PR nightmares and technical challenges with the same intensity she brought to everything. When she finally came home, she looked haggard. The girls were at school and Daniel had taken the morning off, somehow knowing she'd need him. We contained it, she said, collapsing onto their couch. Minimal data actually accessed, but the PR hit is going to be brutal. Stock price is down 12%. I'm sorry, Daniel said, sitting beside her. The board is questioning my leadership. They think I've been distracted lately. She laughed bitterly. They're not wrong. I have been distracted by having an actual life, by being happy. Victoria, I might have to step back, she said quietly. From CEO, I mean. Take a different role, let someone else run the daily operations. Daniel studied her carefully. Is that what you want? I don't know. Maybe? I built this company from nothing. It's been my identity for so long. But lately, she turned to look at him. Lately, I find myself rushing through board meetings to get home for dinner. I delegate more because I'd rather be at Lily's recitals or Emma's science fairs. Maybe that makes me a bad CEO. Or maybe it makes you a good person who's recognizing there's more to life than corporate success. Victoria leaned against him, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. The board meeting is next week. They're going to vote on my future with the company. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together. Together, she repeated like a mantra. I like the sound of that. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. That morning, Lily had her first swimming session with her new protocol. Just 15 minutes in the pool with constant monitoring, but she treated it like the Olympics. Emma timed her laps with a stopwatch, calling out encouragements. Daniel and Victoria watched from the pool deck, both tense despite Dr. Nakamura's presence and assurances. When Lily climbed out of the pool, exhausted but exhilarated, her monitor showing perfect readings, Victoria had tears in her eyes. I have to go, she said, checking her watch. The board... Mom, wait, Lily said, still dripping. Are you going to lose your job? Victoria knelt down, regardless of her expensive suit getting wet. I might step back from being CEO, but that doesn't mean I'm losing my job, just changing it. Would that make you sad? Victoria considered the question seriously. A year ago, it would have devastated me. Now I think maybe it would be okay. I'd get to spend more time with you and Emma and Dad. She still sometimes stumbled over calling Daniel Dad in front of the girls, but it got easier each time. Then I hope they fire you, Lily said matter-of-factly, causing Emma to gasp and Daniel to laugh. Lily, Emma protested, you can't say that. Why not? If it makes Mom happier and she spends more time with us, isn't that good? Victoria hugged her wet daughter, suit be damned. You know what? You're absolutely right. She went to the board meeting with chlorine still faintly detectable in her hair, Lily's wet handprints on her jacket. And when she came home 4 hours later, she was smiling. They offered me a compromise, she announced to the family gathered anxiously in the living room. I stay as CEO, but bring in a chief operating officer to handle daily operations. I'd focus on vision, strategy, the big picture stuff. Work from home more, travel less, have actual boundaries between work and life. That sounds perfect, Daniel said. I thought so too. I accepted immediately, which I think surprised them. A year ago, I would have fought tooth and nail against any dilution of my control. She sat down between the girls on the couch. But a year ago, I didn't have all of you. That night, they celebrated with pizza and board games, a far cry from the corporate dinners Victoria was used to for major career moments. But as she watched Daniel help Emma with her Monopoly strategy while Lily gleefully bankrupted everyone, she knew this was exactly where she wanted to be. The next few months fell into a rhythm that felt sustainable for the first time. Victoria worked from home 3 days a week, only going to the office for essential meetings. Daniel expanded the Disaster Response Center's training programs, bringing in experts from around the state. Lily gradually increased her swimming, always carefully monitored but growing stronger each week. Emma threw herself into her science projects with an intensity that reminded everyone of both her parents. Daniel's methodical approach combined with Sarah's curiosity about the world. It was during this period of calm that life threw them another curveball. Victoria had been feeling tired, attributing it to the stress of restructuring her role at the company. But when she started feeling nauseous in the mornings, she knew. The pregnancy test confirmed it. They were having a baby. Daniel found her sitting on their bathroom floor holding the test, crying and laughing simultaneously. We did say we wanted this, she said. looking up at him with wonder. We did, he agreed, sliding down to sit beside her. Though I thought it might take longer. We're apparently very efficient. I'm 38, Victoria said, suddenly serious. The risks? We'll monitor everything, take every precaution. But Victoria, we're going to have a baby. The reality of it hit them both then. Another child. A baby that would be equally theirs from the very beginning, not brought together by tragedy, but created from their love. Telling the girls was a production. They made a special dinner, Emma's favorite lasagna and Lily's requested garlic bread. Halfway through the meal, Victoria cleared her throat. Girls, we have something to tell you. Emma and Lily exchanged glances, immediately alert. You're having a baby, Lily said matter-of-factly. Daniel nearly choked on his water. How did you? Mom's been tired and queasy. She switched to decaf coffee, and she cried yesterday during a commercial about puppies, Emma listed. We're not stupid. Plus, we heard you talking about trying, Lily added, causing both adults to turn red. And you're okay with this? Victoria asked carefully. The girls looked at each other again, having one of their silent conversations. Then Emma spoke for both of them. We want to name it. Absolutely not, Daniel said immediately. We have a list, Lily protested, pulling out her phone. Good names. Not like Moon Unit or anything weird. We'll consider your suggestions, Victoria said diplomatically, shooting Daniel a look that said they absolutely would not be naming their baby whatever the girls had come up with. But the girls were genuinely excited, already planning how they'd help with the baby, arguing about whether a brother or sister would be better, designing how they'd rearrange the house to accommodate a nursery. That night, after the girls had gone to bed, still chattering about the baby, Daniel and Victoria stood in what would become the nursery. It was currently Victoria's home office, but she was already mentally redesigning it. Are you scared? She asked. Terrified, Daniel admitted, but the good kind of terrified, the kind that means something amazing is about to happen. Victoria took his hand, placing it on her still flat stomach. We made a life. Out of all the chaos and pain and unexpected turns, we made something new. The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Victoria's age. She approached it with the same intensity she brought to everything, researching optimal nutrition, exercise regimes, and developmental stimulation techniques. Daniel had to occasionally remind her that billions of babies had been born without the benefit of prenatal Mozart and organic prenatal vitamins. At 20 weeks, they found out they were having a boy. The girls were thrilled. A brother was apparently more acceptable than another sister, as it wouldn't disrupt their dynamic. We can teach him everything, Emma said excitedly. Music and swimming and emergency response procedures. He's going to be the most prepared baby ever, Lily agreed. Victoria's restructured role at the company proved perfect for the pregnancy. She could work from home when morning sickness hit, take calls from bed when exhaustion overwhelmed her, and actually make it to all her prenatal appointments without juggling board meetings. The Disaster Response Center, meanwhile, was facing its biggest test yet. Weather predictions suggested a severe fire season approaching, worse than the one that had brought them all together. Daniel worked long hours preparing, training additional volunteers, coordinating with CAL FIRE and local departments. One evening, when Victoria was 7 months pregnant and moving with the careful grace of someone carrying precious cargo, Daniel came home to find his entire family in the living room with someone unexpected, Aunt Margaret. She'd become a regular presence since the wedding, slowly rebuilding her relationship with Victoria and forming new ones with the girls. But tonight, she had a different energy about her. I've been going through old family things, she said, pulling out a worn photo album. I found these. Pictures of your parents, Victoria, but also medical records, family histories. I thought, with the new baby coming and Lily's condition, you should have them. They spent hours going through the album, the girls fascinated by pictures of grandparents they'd never meet. But it was a medical note that caught Victoria's attention, a mention of her father having heart flutters that were never fully investigated. That could be long QT, Daniel said quietly, undiagnosed, but genetic. Which means the baby. Victoria's hand went to her belly. We'll test him as soon as he's born, Daniel assured her. Now we know to look for it. Margaret stayed for dinner that night, and as Daniel watched their expanded family around the table, his daughter, Victoria's daughter, who was now also his pregnant wife, her aunt, who'd become like a mother to her. He marveled at how families could be broken and rebuilt, could expand in unexpected ways. 2 weeks before Victoria's due date, the predicted fires began. Not near Cedar Ridge this time, but in the southern part of the state. The Disaster Response Center was activated to coordinate mutual aid, and Daniel found himself managing resources for multiple counties. He was in the middle of a coordination call when his phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom's water broke. Lily's freaking out. Come home now." The drive home was a blur. He found Victoria calmly packing a hospital bag while the girls fluttered around her like anxious butterflies. "It's fine," Victoria said, though her face was tight with pain. "Contractions are still 10 minutes apart. We have time." They didn't have as much time as they thought. By the time they reached the hospital, Victoria's contractions were 3 minutes apart. The girls were sent to the waiting room with Aunt Margaret, who'd met them there, while Daniel stayed with Victoria. "This is happening fast," Victoria gasped between contractions. "You always were efficient," Daniel said, letting her crush his hand. "If I break your fingers, you can't do emergency response work," she pointed out, then cried out as another contraction hit. "Break away. The center can manage without me. You're what matters right now." 4 hours later, Thomas Daniel Hayes Langston entered the world, screaming and perfect. He had Victoria's nose and what might be Daniel's stubborn chin, though it was hard to tell. What was immediately clear was that he was healthy, strong, and very loud. "He's got opinions," the nurse said with a laugh as Thomas continued to voice his displeasure at being born. "He gets that from both sides," Daniel said, unable to stop staring at his son. His son. The words felt surreal. When the girls were finally allowed in, they approached with the reverence of visitors to a shrine. Emma reached out tentatively to touch Thomas's tiny fist, gasping when he gripped her finger. "He's so small," Lily whispered. "Were we ever that small?" "Smaller," Victoria said, exhausted but radiant. "You were a preemie, remember? Spent 2 weeks in the NICU. And I was early too," Emma added. "Mom said I was impatient to get started with life." They all took turns holding Thomas, who had finally stopped crying and was staring at the world with the confused wonder of the newly born. When he was placed in Daniel's arms, Daniel felt something shift in his chest. The same feeling he'd had holding Emma for the first time, but different too. This wasn't tinged with the fear of doing it alone. Victoria was right there. Their daughters were leaning against the bed, and they were surrounded by family and love. "He looks like you," Victoria said softly. "Poor kid," Daniel joked, but his eyes were wet. The first few weeks with Thomas were a blur of feedings and diapers and absolute exhaustion. But unlike with Emma, when Daniel had been running on grief and adrenaline, this time he had help. Victoria, despite recovering from childbirth, was a force of nature, managing feeding schedules with the same precision she'd once brought to board meetings. The girls were eager helpers, though their enthusiasm sometimes exceeded their skill. "I don't think you're supposed to hold him like a football," Emma told Lily, who was attempting a creative carrying position. "The book said football hold is fine, for feeding, not for transport." Thomas, for his part, seemed utterly unfazed by the chaos of his family. He slept through violin practice, conference calls, and even the disaster siren tests from the response center down the street. His cardiac screening came back clear, no signs of long QT or any other condition. Victoria cried with relief when Dr. Nakamura delivered the news, the fear she'd been carrying finally lifting. "He's perfect," she said, watching Thomas sleep in his crib. "Completely, boringly, wonderfully normal." "Nothing about this family is normal," Daniel pointed out, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Our version of normal, then." When Thomas was 3 months old, the fire season Daniel had been preparing for arrived with a vengeance. Not in Cedar Ridge, thankfully, but close enough that the response center was activated continuously. Daniel found himself working 18-hour days, coordinating evacuations, managing resources, trying to prevent another Highway 38 situation. He'd come home exhausted to find Victoria managing conference calls while bouncing Thomas, the girls doing homework at the kitchen table, dinner somehow materializing despite everyone's chaotic schedules. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. One night, after a particularly long day, he found Victoria on the nursery floor with Thomas, who was just beginning to smile intentionally. She was talking to him softly, telling him about her day, and Thomas was gazing at her with the rapt attention that only babies could manage. "Your daddy saved my life once," she was saying. "Not just Lily's, mine too. I was so focused on success that I forgot about living, but he ran into a fire and changed everything." Daniel must have made a sound because she looked up, smiling. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough," he said, joining them on the floor. Thomas immediately turned to him, arms waving excitedly. "He knows you," Victoria said. "Even with all the crazy hours, he knows his daddy." "Of course he does. I'm the fun one," Victoria laughed. "You're the one who falls asleep during night feedings. That was one time. Try 5. They bickered gently, the comfortable teasing of people secure in their love, while Thomas watched them with wide eyes. Then, suddenly, he laughed. A real, genuine baby laugh that had both parents frozen in wonder. "Did he just—" "He laughed," Victoria called out, and immediately Emma and Lily came running. "Make him do it again," Lily demanded. They spent the next hour making ridiculous faces and sounds, trying to coax another laugh from Thomas. When he finally obliged, giggling at Emma's impression of a chicken, they all cheered like he'd won an Olympic medal. Later that night, after the girls were asleep and Thomas was down for his first stretch of night sleep, Daniel and Victoria sat on their porch, the same porch where they'd first acknowledged their feelings, where they'd decided to have Thomas, where so many important moments of their life together had unfolded. "Do you ever think about how different life would be if you hadn't stopped that day?" Victoria asked quietly. "Every day," Daniel admitted, "but not in a what-if way, more in a grateful way. That fire was the worst day of so many people's lives, but it brought us together." "Beauty from ashes," Victoria murmured. Lily said that in her essay for school. She wrote about how forest fires, as destructive as they are, also clear the way for new growth. Some seeds only germinate after being exposed to fire. Smart kid. She gets it from her dad. Daniel looked at her questioningly. "Both of them," Victoria clarified. "You and whatever genetics her biological father contributed, but mostly you. The dad who chose her, who saved her, who shows her every day what real strength looks like." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of their neighborhood. Normal, peaceful sounds so different from the roar of fire that had brought them together. In the distance, Daniel could see the mountains, scarred but healing, their silhouettes familiar and comforting against the star-filled sky. The sound of Thomas crying at 3 a.m. had become as familiar as breathing. Daniel stumbled from bed, waving Victoria back down when she started to rise. "My turn," he mumbled, making his way to the nursery where his son was expressing his displeasure with the world. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said softly, lifting Thomas from his crib. "What's the crisis this time? Hungry? Wet? Just felt like chatting?" Thomas quieted immediately upon being picked up, his tiny fist wrapping around Daniel's finger with surprising strength. They'd discovered early on that Thomas was a social baby. He just wanted company, especially in those dark pre-dawn hours when the world felt too big and lonely. Daniel settled into the rocking chair Sarah had once nursed Emma in, a piece they'd kept despite everything else from the old house being lost in the fire. As he rocked his son, he thought about time's strange elasticity, how it had been just 18 months since the fire, yet that day felt both like yesterday and a lifetime ago. "Your sisters are going to spoil you rotten," Daniel whispered to Thomas, who was staring at him with those serious baby eyes. "Emma's already planning your education curriculum, and Lily's determined to teach you to swim before you can walk. You don't stand a chance at being normal, kid." Thomas cooed in response, a sound that might have been agreement or gasp, but which Daniel chose to interpret as understanding. These midnight conversations had become precious to him, moments when the chaos of their daily life settled into something quiet and profound. The door creaked open, and Emma appeared, rubbing her eyes. "Can't sleep," she said simply, padding over to them in her pajamas. "Bad dream?" Daniel asked. "No, just thinking." She perched on the arm of the chair, careful not to disturb Thomas. "Dad, do you think Mom would have liked Victoria?" The question caught Daniel off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Emma was 14 now, processing complex emotions with increasing sophistication. "I think," Daniel said carefully, "your mom would have been grateful that we found happiness again. She would have loved how Victoria treats you like her own daughter, how she honors your mom's memory instead of trying to replace it." Emma nodded, reaching out to stroke Thomas's cheek. "Sometimes I feel guilty for being happy, like I'm forgetting her." "You're not forgetting her, Em. You're living the life she wanted for you, full of love and opportunity and joy. That's not forgetting, that's honoring." They sat together in the dim nursery, 3 generations of a family built from loss and love, until Thomas fell back asleep and Emma's eyes grew heavy. Daniel carried his son back to the crib, then walked Emma to her room, tucking her in like she was 5 again instead of 14. "Love you, Dad," she murmured, already half asleep. "Love you too, Em." The next morning brought controlled chaos, as most mornings did. Victoria was trying to conduct a video conference while Thomas performed his morning symphony of sounds from his bouncy seat. Lily was practicing violin in the music room, the notes floating through the house. Emma was in the kitchen, conducting what appeared to be a chemistry experiment with breakfast. "Is that supposed to be green?" Daniel asked, peering at whatever Emma was creating. "It's a protein smoothie with spirulina. Very healthy." "It looks like swamp water." "Don't knock it until you try it," Emma said, pouring him a glass with a challenging look. Daniel, who had eaten MREs in Afghanistan and survived his own bachelor cooking after Sarah's death, gamely took a sip. It was actually worse than it looked, but Emma was watching hopefully, so he managed to swallow. "Interesting," he said diplomatically. "You hate it." "I don't hate it. I'm just not sure my taste buds are sophisticated enough to appreciate it." Emma laughed, dumping the rest down the sink. "Lily already told me it was disgusting. I was hoping you'd be more adventurous." "I ran into a wildfire. My adventurous quotient is used up for this lifetime." Victoria emerged from her office, having finished her call. She looked polished and professional from the waist up, but was wearing pajama pants and fuzzy slippers below camera range. "Did I hear something about breakfast?" "Dad's making actual food since my smoothie was a failure," Emma announced. "I didn't volunteer for that," Daniel protested, but he was already pulling eggs from the refrigerator. Cooking for his family had become one of his favorite parts of their morning routine. As he scrambled eggs and fried bacon, the familiar rhythm of their morning continued around him. Victoria fielded emails while feeding Thomas his bottle. Lily finished her practice and joined them, her hair still sticking up from sleep. Emma set the table without being asked, a responsibility she'd taken on herself months ago. "Swimming today?" Lily asked hopefully. It was Saturday, which meant her extended pool session with Dr. Nakamura's supervision. "After the memorial dedication," Victoria reminded her. "The whole town will be there." Today marked 2 years since the Cedar Ridge fire. The memorial garden was being officially dedicated, with a special recognition for the citizens who had helped during the evacuation. Daniel had tried to avoid being singled out, but the mayor had insisted. "Do I have to give a speech?" Daniel asked for the 10th time that week. "Yes," Victoria said firmly. "People need to hear from you. You're not just the guy who saved one child. You're the person who spent 2 years building our emergency preparedness. Your words matter." Daniel grumbled, but knew she was right. The Disaster Response Center had become a model for other communities, and he'd been invited to speak at conferences across the state. He always declined, preferring to focus on the work rather than the recognition. But today was different. Today was about their community, their shared trauma and recovery. The memorial garden was packed when they arrived. The space that had once housed Henderson's auto shop had been transformed into a peaceful oasis. Native plants selected for fire resistance, paths winding between memorial stones, and at the center, a sculpture of a phoenix rising from flames. Daniel saw familiar faces everywhere. Marcus and his family, his son healthy thanks to Lily's screening program. Mrs. Chen from their old neighborhood, who had lost her house but rebuilt with the community's help. The Nakamuras, who had become close family friends. Even some of the firefighters who had been on the mountain that day, their faces triggering visceral memories of smoke and fear. The ceremony began with the mayor's remarks, then testimonials from survivors. When Daniel's name was called, his family squeezed his hands. Victoria on one side, Emma on the other, Lily holding Thomas, who was blissfully asleep despite the crowd. Standing at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, Daniel's prepared remarks suddenly felt inadequate. These people didn't need platitudes about heroism or resilience. They needed truth. 2 years ago, he began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd, I was just a single dad trying to make it through each day. I worked at the shop that stood where we're gathered now. I thought I knew what fear was. I'd felt it when my wife was diagnosed with cancer, when she died, when I realized I had to raise our daughter alone. He paused, finding Emma's encouraging face in the crowd. But that day on the mountain, I learned a different kind of fear. The immediate primal terror of seeing death racing toward you at 40 miles per hour. And in that moment, when I heard a child screaming, I didn't think about being brave. I just thought about my daughter, about every parent's worst nightmare, and my feet were moving before my brain caught up. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Victoria had tears streaming down her face, not bothering to hide them. People call me a hero for running into that fire, but here's the truth. We're all heroes. Every person who helped evacuate others, who shared their water when supplies ran low, who offered shelter to strangers, who rebuilt when everything was lost. The real heroism isn't in the dramatic moments, it's in what comes after. Daniel looked at his family, drawing strength from their presence. It's in Victoria Langston using her resources not for publicity, but for genuine change. It's in my daughter Emma helping other kids cope with loss through her peer support group. It's in Lily turning her health scare into a screening program that saved 17 lives so far. It's in all of you, showing up day after day to rebuild not just structures, but community. He could see people nodding, some crying, all remembering their own struggles and triumphs. This garden isn't just a memorial to what we lost. It's a testament to what we found. In the ashes of that terrible day, we discovered that we're stronger together than apart. That tragedy can forge bonds that prosperity never could. That sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the best things you never expected. Daniel's voice caught slightly as he continued. I lost my truck that day, my job, all the hiking trails where I'd proposed to my late wife. But I gained a new family, a new purpose, and an understanding that life's too short and precious to waste on fear or regret. He gestured to the phoenix sculpture behind him. The phoenix doesn't rise despite the ashes. It rises because of them. We are all phoenixes, transformed by fire into something we never imagined we could be. And while I would never wish that day on anyone, I can't deny the beauty that's grown from its ashes. The applause was immediate and sustained. Daniel quickly left the podium, uncomfortable with the attention, but person after person stopped him to share their own stories, their own transformations. An hour later, as the formal ceremony wound down, Daniel found himself standing with Marcus near the memorial wall, where the names of those who'd lost their lives were engraved. Sarah Hayes was there too, though she'd died years before the fire. Victoria had insisted, saying that Sarah was part of their story, part of what made Daniel who he was that day on the mountain. You did good up there, Marcus said what we're all feeling but couldn't put into words. I just spoke the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. Marcus paused, then added, My son wants to be like you when he grows up, wants to be a first responder, help people. There are worse ambitions, Daniel said, watching his own children across the garden. Emma was helping a younger kid reach the water fountain. Lily was explaining the phoenix sculpture to a group of tourists, and Victoria was managing Thomas while somehow also coordinating with the event organizers. 2 years, Marcus mused, feels like yesterday and forever ago at the same time. Before Daniel could respond, his phone buzzed with an emergency alert, then another, and another. Around him, other phones began sounding the same alarm. Fire! Someone shouted. There's a fire in Riverside Canyon! The crowd's mood shifted instantly from memorial to mobilization. Daniel was already moving, his training taking over. Riverside Canyon was 12 miles away, but with the current wind conditions, it could reach Cedar Ridge in hours. I have to go, he told Victoria, who had appeared at his side with the children. Go, she said immediately. We'll handle things here. But as Daniel headed for his vehicle, he heard footsteps behind him. Emma was following, her face determined. No. I'm trained in basic first aid and evacuation assistance. You trained me yourself. I can help at the command center. Daniel wanted to refuse, to keep his daughter safe, but he saw Sarah's determination in her eyes, the same need to help that had driven Sarah to become a nurse. "Command center only," he said firmly. "You do not leave that building." Emma nodded, and they drove together to the Disaster Response Center, which was already bustling with activity. Daniel's team had initiated protocols without waiting for his arrival, a testament to their training and preparation. "What's the situation?" Daniel asked his deputy director, Janet, a former Marine who ran operations with military precision. "Started 90 minutes ago, 'cause unknown. Already at 300 acres and growing. CAL FIRE's en route, but they're stretched thin with fires in 3 other counties. Riverside Canyon residents are evacuating, but there's a senior care facility that needs assistance." Daniel's mind went into overdrive, coordinating resources, establishing evacuation routes, ensuring they didn't repeat the chaos of 2 years ago. Emma worked beside him, manning phones, updating the digital tracking board, proving herself invaluable. Through the command center's large windows, they could see the smoke plume growing, darkening the afternoon sky. The wind was picking up, pushing the fire toward populated areas faster than the initial models predicted. "Dad," Emma said quietly, looking at her phone. "Mom's asking if they should evacuate." Daniel checked the maps, calculating distances and wind speeds. Their house was still outside the probable danger zone, but that could change in minutes with a wind shift. "Tell her to pack the essentials, but not to leave yet. We'll have advance warning if it gets that far." The next hours were controlled chaos. Daniel coordinated with fire departments from 6 counties, managed evacuation centers, and deployed his volunteers to assist with traffic control. Emma never left his side, anticipating needs, handling communications with a composure that made him proud and terrified in equal measure. "Senior Center successfully evacuated," Janet reported. "But we've got a problem. There's a group of hikers reported missing on the Riverside Trail. Search and rescue is already deployed elsewhere." Daniel studied the map. The Riverside Trail was directly in the fire's path. Anyone up there had maybe an hour before they were trapped. "I'll go," he said, already grabbing his emergency pack. "Dad, no!" Emma protested. "You can't." "I know those trails, Em. I can get them out." "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. You need a partner. That's protocol, right? Never go alone?" She was right, and he hated that she was right. But there wasn't time to argue or wait for someone else. "You stay at the trailhead with the radio. The second anything looks bad, you leave. Promise me." "I promise." They drove toward the smoke, the sky growing darker with each mile. At the trailhead, Daniel could already smell the fire, see the orange glow through the trees. The hikers, a family of 4 according to the report, were somewhere up there. "If I'm not back in 30 minutes, you leave," Daniel told Emma. "No arguments, no heroics. You get yourself to safety." Emma hugged him tightly. "Be careful, Dad. We just got our family complete. Don't break it." Daniel ran up the trail he'd hiked dozens of times, but everything looked different now with smoke obscuring the familiar landmarks. He called out as he went, listening for responses over the growing roar of the fire. 15 minutes up the trail, he found them. A couple with 2 young children, the parents carrying the kids, all of them coughing from the smoke. They'd taken a wrong turn, ended up on a dead-end spur trail. "Thank God!" the father gasped. "We couldn't find our way back." "Follow me," Daniel commanded. "We need to move fast." He took one of the children, a boy about 5, while directing the family back down the trail. The smoke was thickening, embers starting to fall around them like hellish snow. The boy in his arms was crying, calling for his mother. "Your mom's right behind us," Daniel assured him. "We're going to be fine. Can you be brave for just a little bit longer?" The boy nodded against his shoulder, and Daniel was transported back to that day 2 years ago, carrying Lily out of danger, feeling the same weight of responsibility, the same desperate need to save an innocent life. They emerged from the trail to find Emma still at her post, relief flooding her face when she saw them. She immediately helped the family into their vehicle, giving them water and basic first aid for smoke inhalation. "The road's still clear to the east," she told them. "Follow the evacuation signs to the Cedar Ridge High School shelter." As the family drove away, the mother leaning out the window to shout thank yous, Daniel and Emma stood for a moment watching the fire crest the ridge above them. "We should go," Emma said quietly. They returned to the command center to find the situation had improved. The wind had shifted, pushing the fire away from populated areas and into a region that had burned the previous year, where there was little fuel to sustain it. CAL FIRE had arrived in force, and containment was progressing. "Looks like we dodged a bullet," Janet said. "No structures lost, no fatalities, everyone accounted for." Daniel sank into a chair, exhaustion hitting him suddenly. Emma sat beside him, and he put his arm around her. "You did good today," he said. "Your mom would be proud." "Both my moms would be," Emma corrected, and Daniel's throat tightened with emotion. They stayed at the command center until the fire was 70% contained, then drove home through streets that smelled of smoke but were intact, whole, spared. Victoria met them at the door, Thomas in her arms, Lily beside her. "Don't ever do that again," Victoria said, pulling them both into a fierce hug. "Which part?" Daniel asked. "The running toward danger or the taking our teenage daughter with me?" "Both. All of it." But she was smiling through her tears. Marcus called, said Emma was amazing, completely professional, said she has a future in emergency response if she wants it. "Maybe," Emma said thoughtfully, "but I think I want to be a doctor, like Mom was going to be before she became a nurse. Help people, but from the medical side." They went inside together, their family complete, safe, surrounded by the smoky smell of danger past, but not by danger itself. Through the windows, they could still see the glow on the horizon, the fire being fought by hundreds of brave souls. That night, after showers and dinner and checking on neighbors, they gathered in the living room. Thomas was asleep in his swing, making the soft snuffling sounds that marked his deep sleep. The girls were curled on the couch, exhausted from the day's adrenaline. "Tell us the story," Lily said quietly. "The whole thing, from the beginning." Daniel and Victoria exchanged glances. They'd told pieces of the story before, but never the whole thing, never the complete journey from that terrible day to this moment. "It started with a normal Saturday," Daniel began, and Victoria picked up the thread, and together they wove the tale of fire and fear, of courage and connection, of loss and love. Emma and Lily added their own memories, their perspectives on watching their parents fall in love, on becoming sisters, on welcoming Thomas. As they talked, Daniel realized this was their origin story, their family mythology, the tale that would be told at graduations and weddings, passed down to Thomas, and maybe someday to grandchildren. It was a story born from tragedy but defined by triumph, proof that sometimes the worst moments of our lives clear the ground for the best things we never saw coming. And then today, Daniel concluded, we faced another fire, but this time we faced it together, prepared, as a family and a community. We've learned to live with fire, to respect it, to be ready for it, but not to be ruled by fear of it. "Because we're phoenixes," Lily said sleepily. "All of us." "All of us," Victoria agreed, pulling her family closer. Outside, the night sky still glowed faintly orange, but inside their home was warm and safe and filled with love. The fire would be contained, the danger would pass, and life would continue, not unmarked by trauma, but not defined by it either. 2 weeks later, life had settled back into its rhythm. The Riverside fire had been fully contained with minimal damage. The emergency protocols had worked perfectly, and the community felt a renewed confidence in their preparedness. Daniel was at the response center, reviewing after-action reports with his team, when his phone rang. It was Dr. Nakamura. "Daniel, I have some interesting news about Lily's latest tests. Can you and Victoria come to my office this afternoon?" The careful neutrality in his voice set off Daniel's paternal alarm bells. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. But I'd prefer to discuss it in person." Daniel called Victoria, and they met at Dr. Nakamura's office, both trying not to appear as anxious as they felt. Lily was at school, unaware of the appointment. They'd learned not to worry her unnecessarily with medical meetings unless results required her involvement. Dr. Nakamura greeted them warmly, which immediately eased some of Daniel's tension. Bad news never came with genuine smiles. "I've been reviewing Lily's 6-month monitoring data," he began, pulling up charts on his computer screen. "Her response to the treatment has been exceptional. Better than exceptional. It's remarkable." Victoria leaned forward. "What does that mean?" It means that Lily's heart rhythm has stabilized to a degree I rarely see in long QT patients. The medication, combined with her careful conditioning program and perhaps some genetic factors we don't fully understand, has essentially normalized her cardiac function. Daniel felt Victoria's hand find his. Are you saying she's cured? There's no cure for long QT, Dr. Nakamura said carefully. She'll always need monitoring, will always need to be aware of her condition. But I'm saying that with continued management, there's no reason Lily can't pursue competitive swimming at the highest levels if that's what she wants. Victoria made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She can compete? She can compete. In fact, there are several Olympic athletes with managed long QT syndrome. With proper protocols, there's no reason Lily couldn't be one of them someday if she has the talent and drive. They sat in stunned silence for a moment, absorbing this unexpected reversal of fortune. How do we tell her? Victoria asked finally. I'd suggest letting her swim practice tomorrow as usual, then surprise her with the news that she can start training for actual competition again, Dr. Nakamura suggested. Kids her age appreciate the drama of a good surprise. That evening, they managed to act normal through dinner, though Daniel caught Victoria tearing up every time Lily mentioned swimming. Emma noticed something was up but kept quiet, recognizing the signs of a parental secret in progress. The next day, they all went to Lily's swimming session. She'd been working with a new coach, focusing on technique rather than speed, treating it as physical therapy rather than training. But even holding back, her natural talent was evident. After her session, as she toweled off, Daniel and Victoria approached with barely contained excitement. Lily, Dr. Nakamura called yesterday, Victoria began. Lily's face immediately showed worry. Is something wrong? No, sweetheart, something's very right. Victoria's voice broke. You can compete again. Real competition. Everything you've been working toward. For a moment, Lily stood frozen, water dripping from her hair, eyes wide with disbelief. Really? I can really compete? Like actual meets and maybe nationals and all of it, Daniel confirmed. With monitoring and safety protocols, but yes, all of it. Lily launched herself at them, soaking them both with her wet swimsuit, crying and laughing simultaneously. Emma joined the hug, and Thomas in his stroller contributed by babbling excitedly at the commotion. I want to start tomorrow, Lily said, already planning. No, today. Can we call Coach Martinez? Can we sign up for the next meet? Can we... Slow down, fish girl, Daniel laughed. One step at a time. But Lily was already lost in dreams of pools and races and possibilities she'd thought were lost forever. Watching her joy, Daniel was struck by how perfectly this moment encapsulated their family's journey. Loss transformed into gain, setback into comeback, ashes into phoenix wings. That evening, as Lily researched swimming competitions on her tablet with obsessive focus, and Emma helped her create a training schedule that wouldn't interfere with violin practice, Victoria found Daniel on their porch, their traditional spot for important conversations. She's going to drive herself crazy trying to make up for lost time, Victoria observed. She gets that from her mother. The biological one or me? You, Daniel said without hesitation. The drive, the refusal to accept limitations, the ability to turn obstacles into opportunities. That's all you. They stood together watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. The fire scars were barely visible now, covered by new growth that was somehow more vibrant for having emerged from destruction. I've been thinking, Victoria said carefully, a phrase that usually preceded significant announcements. Should I be worried? Maybe? She turned to face him. The company wants me to open a new division focused on disaster response technology. Smart sensors for early fire detection, AI-powered evacuation routing, that sort of thing. That sounds perfect for you. It would mean working more closely with the response center. Our teams would essentially be partners. Daniel considered this. So we'd be working together and living together? Is that too much togetherness? He pulled her close. With you? There's no such thing as too much. They were interrupted by Thomas crying from inside, the baby monitor crackling to life with his demands for attention. Your turn, Victoria said. How is it always my turn when he's cranky? Because you're better at the midnight negotiations. He's already got you wrapped around his tiny finger. Daniel couldn't argue with that. He found Thomas standing in his crib, arms raised demandingly. The boy had started pulling himself up recently, a development that meant they'd need to lower the crib mattress soon. "Hey, buddy, what's the crisis now?" Thomas babbled something that sounded like dada, though Victoria insisted it was just random sounds. Daniel chose to believe it was intentional. As he settled into the rocking chair with his son, Emma appeared in the doorway. "Can't sleep again?" Daniel asked. "Thinking again," she corrected, sitting on the floor beside them. "Dad, do you think things happen for a reason?" It was a big question, one Daniel had wrestled with himself many times. "I think we make reason out of things that happen. We create meaning from chaos." So the fire wasn't meant to bring our family together? Daniel considered carefully. "I don't think tragedy has purpose, but I think we can give purpose to tragedy by how we respond to it. The fire was random, horrible, destructive, but we chose to build something from that destruction." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I'm writing my college essay about it. Is that weird, using our family's story?" "It's your story to tell, Em. Just remember that not everything needs to be shared. Some parts of our journey can stay ours." "I know. I'm focusing on the phoenix thing, how destruction can create space for unexpected growth. My English teacher says it's a strong metaphor." "It's more than a metaphor," Daniel said, looking at his daughter, taller now, more confident, carrying herself with a mixture of Sarah's grace and Victoria's determination. "It's our lived experience." The next months passed in a blur of growth and change. Lily threw herself into swimming with renewed passion, quickly moving up through competition levels. Emma's grades continued to excel, her college prospects bright with Victoria's resources, ensuring she could aim for any school she wanted. Thomas began walking, then running, turning their child-proofed house into his personal exploration zone. The Disaster Response Center and Victoria's new technology division began collaborating on revolutionary early warning systems. Daniel found himself in meetings with tech innovators and emergency response experts from around the world, his practical experience grounding Victoria's visionary technology in real-world application. One evening, as spring approached with its inevitable fire season warnings, they hosted a dinner for all the people who'd become family over the past 3 years. Marcus and his family, the Nakamuras, Aunt Margaret, Janet from the Response Center, and several others gathered around their extended dining table. "A toast," Marcus proposed, raising his glass. "To the Phoenix families, all of us who rose from the ashes of that terrible day." "To second chances," Victoria added. "To unexpected connections," Dr. Nakamura contributed. "To being brave enough to rebuild," Aunt Margaret said. "To choosing love over fear," Daniel said, looking at his family. Emma, confident and brilliant. Lily, determined and resilient. Thomas, toddling between chairs with drooly grins. And Victoria, his unlikely love, his partner in this beautiful, chaotic life. "To all of it," Emma concluded. "The good, the bad, the scary, the wonderful. To our story." They clinked glasses, their voices mingling in laughter and conversation. Through the dining room windows, the mountains stood as silent witnesses, scarred but beautiful, forever changed but still magnificent, proof that some things could survive even the most devastating fires and emerge transformed. As the evening wore on, Daniel found himself standing apart for a moment, watching the controlled chaos of their gathered family. Victoria appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his. "No regrets?" she asked quietly. "Not a single one," he answered. "You?" "Only that it took a tragedy to bring us together. I wonder sometimes who we'd be if we'd met differently." "We wouldn't be us," Daniel said with certainty. "We're who we are because of what we've been through. The fire didn't just bring us together, it forged us into people capable of building this." Victoria squeezed his hand. "Then I guess I'm grateful for the fire. Is that terrible to say?" "No," Daniel said, thinking of Sarah, of the life they'd planned that had been derailed by cancer, of the life he'd never imagined that had risen from those ashes. "It's honest. We can acknowledge that sometimes the worst things lead to the best things without minimizing the pain of the worst things." "Very philosophical, Mr. Hayes." "I have my moments, Mrs. Hayes Langston." They were pulled back into the gathering by Thomas, who had discovered he could get tremendous reactions by dropping his sippy cup repeatedly from his high chair. Lily was timing how long it took different adults to pick it up, conducting what she called a social experiment, but what was clearly toddler-enabled chaos. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, each taking a moment to express gratitude for the bonds they'd formed, Daniel realized this was what victory looked like. Not dramatic rescues or heroic gestures, but this. Family dinners, shared laughter, children safe and thriving, love that had grown from the most unlikely soil. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, mixed in with the usual bills and advertisements. Daniel almost threw it away, not recognizing the return address from Washington, D.C., but the official seal caught his eye, and when he opened it, his hands began to shake. "Victoria," he called, his voice carrying an edge that brought her running from her office, Thomas on her hip. "What's wrong?" He handed her the letter wordlessly. Her eyes scanned the formal language, the congressional letterhead, the invitation that would change everything. "They want to award you the Congressional Medal of Honor for civilian service," she breathed. "Daniel, this is the highest honor a civilian can receive." "I can't accept this," Daniel said immediately. "I just did what anyone would do." Victoria set Thomas down in his playpen and took Daniel's face in her hands. "Stop saying that. Stop diminishing what you did. You ran into a fire to save a stranger's child. You've spent 3 years building a disaster response system that saved countless lives. This recognition isn't just for that one day, it's for everything since." Emma and Lily burst through the door, home from school, their chatter dying when they saw their parents' serious faces. "What happened?" Emma asked, immediately worried. Victoria showed them the letter. Lily read it aloud, her voice growing more excited with each line. "A ceremony at the Capitol? With the president? Dad, this is huge!" "It's unnecessary," Daniel muttered, but he was fighting a losing battle against 3 determined women. "We're going," Victoria declared, "all of us. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and Thomas deserves to see his father recognized for the hero he is, even if he won't remember it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Victoria insisted on new suits for everyone, despite Daniel's protests about the expense. Emma and Lily practiced walking in formal shoes, treating it like training for a secret mission. Thomas, oblivious to the fuss, continued his toddler explorations with cheerful destruction. The night before they left for Washington, Daniel couldn't sleep. He stood in Thomas's nursery, watching his son sleep peacefully, thinking about the strange journey that had brought them here. 3 years ago, he'd been a widowed mechanic struggling to pay for his daughter's violin rental. Now he was about to receive the nation's highest civilian honor. "Can't sleep either?" Emma's voice came from the doorway. "Too much thinking," Daniel admitted. Emma joined him at Thomas's crib. "Mom would be proud, you know. Sarah Mom, I mean." Daniel's throat tightened. Emma rarely used Sarah's name anymore, usually just referring to her as Mom, with Victoria being Mom too, context determining which one she meant. "You think so?" "I know so. I remember her saying once that you never saw yourself clearly, that you didn't understand how special you were. She said you thought being good was normal, but it's not. Most people don't run toward danger. Most people don't dedicate their lives to helping others after tragedy. You're not normal, Dad. You're extraordinary." Daniel pulled his daughter close. "When did you get so wise?" "I had good teachers, all 3 of my parents." The flight to Washington was Thomas's first, and he handled it with the aplomb of someone who'd inherited Victoria's adaptability. He charmed the flight attendants, played peekaboo with the passengers behind them, and only had one minor meltdown when his ears popped during descent. Their hotel room overlooked the Capitol, and that evening, as they prepared for the next day's ceremony, a knock came at the door. Daniel opened it to find Marcus standing there with his son, both in suits. "What are you doing here?" Daniel asked, stunned. "You think we'd miss this?" "Half of Cedar Ridge is here, man. You saved our kids, built our emergency response system. We're your cheering section." Indeed, the ceremony the next day was packed with familiar faces. Mrs. Chen, the Nakamuras, Janet, and the entire disaster response team, families Daniel had helped evacuate during subsequent fires. Aunt Margaret had flown in from Portland, where she'd moved to be closer to her own grandchildren, but she wouldn't miss this for anything. The ceremony itself was a blur. Daniel stood with 6 other recipients, each being honored for different acts of civilian service. There was a teacher who'd saved her entire class during a tornado, a teenager who'd developed a water purification system for refugee camps, a doctor who'd stayed behind during a hurricane to keep the hospital generators running. When Daniel's name was called, the citation read by a senator he'd only seen on television, the words seemed to be about someone else. They spoke of his actions during the Cedar Ridge fire, but also his subsequent work building the Disaster Response Center, the lives saved through the early warning systems he'd helped develop with Victoria's company, the cardiac screening program inspired by Lily's condition. Daniel Hayes represents the best of American spirit, the senator concluded. The willingness to risk everything for strangers, and the determination to turn personal trauma into public service. As the medal was placed around his neck, Daniel's eyes found his family in the crowd. Victoria was crying openly, not caring about her carefully applied makeup. Emma stood tall and proud, looking so much like Sarah in that moment it took his breath away. Lily was bouncing slightly, unable to contain her excitement. And Thomas, in Victoria's arms, was clapping without understanding why, but knowing it was something wonderful. The president spoke next, personally thanking each recipient. When he reached Daniel, he paused. "Mr. Hayes, I understand your daughter Lily has quite a story of her own, turning her cardiac diagnosis into a screening program that saved 17 young athletes." 18 now, sir," Lily called out from the audience, causing a ripple of laughter. 18 then, the president smiled. "Perhaps we should be giving her a medal too." After the ceremony, there was a reception where Daniel was overwhelmed by well-wishers. But the moment that stayed with him came when a woman approached with a teenage boy. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Jennifer Martinez. This is my son, Diego. He was the first one diagnosed through Lily's screening program. Long QT, just like her. If she hadn't started that program, if you hadn't saved her that day..." She couldn't finish, overcome with emotion. Diego, a tall kid wearing his high school basketball jersey under his suit jacket, shook Daniel's hand solemnly. "I'm alive because of what you did. What your whole family did. Thank you." As the Martinez family walked away, Victoria slipped her hand into Daniel's. "Still think you're not a hero?" "I think we're all heroes," Daniel said, looking around the room at the other recipients, at his community members who'd traveled across the country to support him, at his daughters now deep in conversation with the teenager who'd invented the water purification system. Every person who chooses to help instead of hide, to build instead of blame. The trip home was subdued, everyone exhausted from the emotional intensity of the ceremony. But as their plane descended toward California, Lily suddenly gasped. "Look!" Below them, the mountains were visible, including the area where the Cedar Ridge fire had burned. But what 3 years ago had been black devastation was now green with new growth, the scars still visible but softened, integrated into a landscape that was different but still beautiful. "It's like us," Emma said quietly. "Changed,